Okay, we are recording. Thank y'all for participating tonight in my 50 Shades of Pseudo conversation. I feel like it's going to be a fun night. This is presented by the DOC, the Duel of Concepts. You can find us on YouTube along with my good brother Rep. That is a part of my creative team and that is recording right now. Shout outs to him. Love him. Thank you for the flyers. Um, with that being said, tonight we have a great conversation. I have my brother Fusion here. He has some things that he want to get off his chest when it comes to the pseudo conversation, and it's gonna be a good one. Hopefully, some people will show up that will be on the opposing side of this conversation, but if not, we still got facts and good conversation ahead. Um, So, with that being said, I just want to shout out the fact that I have a 3-on-3 debate coming up: Kamala versus Trump, Team Purple Diva versus Team OG Moses, coming up October 20th. That is Sunday at 2 p.m. So, please be back here for that. And we also have Exploring Islam panel featuring God Energy coming up Wednesday. That's the 23rd. It's going to be part two, y'all. So back by popular demand. Everybody was asking me about it. So here it goes. With that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Fusion. Fusion, you ready?
Yep. All right. So, uh, good evening, everybody. This will be a quick intro. Basically, Esau already gave the main points of it, but to go into it, it's the basic spread of pseudoscience, especially in the Black community, basically. And we're gonna go into what pseudoscience is and what actual science is, and the difference between the two, so that we can recognize what they are when we see them, especially if we need to use them functionally. It'll be pretty much an open panel, like she said. So we'll just discuss, and it's basically going into different scientific theories, some things that are scientific and actually sound pseudoscientific, but that are scientifically proven. Um, we can also debunk some things scientifically that are considered science and considered fact, but are not fact. So we'll go into a lot of that, but it'll be an open discussion. Um, I'll start out with a blurb here. So there's pseudoscience and there's science. This is a quick blurb I'll read. Pseudoscience refers to beliefs, theories, or practices that claim to be scientific but lack empirical evidence, rigorous testing, and standards of the scientific method. Pseudosciences often present their claims as scientific sounding, present their claims with scientific sounding jargon, but fail to adhere to the principles of falsibility, reproducibility, and peer review that are fundamental to genuine science. So when we say pseudoscientific, that is basically what we're talking about. Something that is not only untrue, or not only has little evidence, but is presented as if it is not only true, but also has scientific evidence to back it up when it does not. So, any questions on the definition of pseudoscience?
No,
Not,
I
I'll keep
think
going.
we are all pretty good with the definition.
Okay. Okay. So, here's some key features in pseudoscience: lack of empirical support. Claims are not supported by reliable evidence. Unfalsibility, theories that are often set up in a way they cannot be proven wrong. Reliance on anecdotal evidence. Instead of controlled studies, personal stories and testimonials are used as evidence. Resistance to testing. Pseudoscientific ideas often avoid critical examination and are immune to disproof. or are immune to disproof. Lack of progress. Genuine science evolves with new data, while pseudoscience tends to remain static or recycle old ideas. Examples of pseudoscience would be astrology, creationism, ancient astronauts theory, flat earth theory, phrenology, um, the slave trade never happened, um, carbon and melanin are the same thing, and I'll leave it at those. So I'll describe some of those that we might not know what that is. Like phrenology is an outdated theory that suggests um, a person's character or um, a person's very being, sometimes their mental state, or if they have a mental disease, can be determined by the shape of their skull or how many bumps they have on their head. That's a pseudoscience that is can be confused with neuroscience. So that's not neuroscience. Phrenology is a pseudoscience. It's just feeling the bumps on a person's head in the shape of their skull and telling them they have Parkinson's disease. So, um, flat Earth theory, ancient astronauts, even creationism, and even astrology are pseudosciences. So, for example, there's astronomy versus astrology, just like there's archaeology versus pseudo archaeology, astronomy versus astrology. Astrology is a scientific study of celestial objects. Space, the physical universe as a whole, relies on observation, mathematics, physics, and understands the properties and behaviors of the objects specifically. Um, it uses telescopes. I'll go ahead and read the rest of this. So, the use of telescopes, instruments to observe celestial objects, application to the scientific method, including hypothesis and testing to explain phenomena. So, that's a huge difference between astronomy and astrology, is in the way that you come to a conclusion in a pseudoscience versus the way that you come to a conclusion in actual science. Without the testing and the conclusion and the repeated results, and then plus the peer review, generally that thing is not supposed to be classified as a scientific reality. So, and even once that thing is, it will be continue to be built on, and more people will add to it, and that even what's discovered will become more advanced over time. Again, another difference between a pseudoscience, an astrological chart from 2,000 years ago that is still the
Mm.
same as it was 2,000 years ago versus an actual astronomy chart, which changes as the years go on.
You know what's crazy? What else changes as the year go on? Laws and rules. It's only really one law, and that's the universal law. And I notice once you just really just focus on that law, man, laws don't even apply to you. When you really fully understand who you are and what you're capable of, and you just operate on the universal laws, man, laws cannot even touch you because you're not even on that frequency. You understand? It's like impossible. I can't explain. I just know because I fuck with it every day. I do. I fuck around every day. I'm just saying. Because at the end of the day, you
Yeah, I
gotta think about it.
appreciate that.
A lot of rules. Yes, yes. A lot of rules are meant to be broken. You gotta think about it. A lot of time when people stamp some rules, that was just something that was good at that time, at that
Okay.
particular, yeah, I mean, situation.
I get
All
that,
rules,
and
that's a fact.
I appreciate, yeah, and I get that, and tonight we're actually having a conversation about some of those laws and things that we find pseudo, and putting it with versus a more scientific method of it all. So you are more than welcome to stay and be a part of the conversation. But we're going to go right back to Fusion. I think he was finishing up, and then we're going to start off with one of his things that he wanted to address. Uh, and then we're going to go to you, Balboy. You want to finish up, Fusion?
Yeah. Basically, actually, that was kind of the into that. It's just an example of astronomy versus astrology. So that can be taken across the board when it comes to um, carbon and melanin. You can take things that the same method to dictate whether they're different. You can take ancient astronomy or ancient archaeology and pseudo archaeology and take the same method and tell whether it's those two things are the same or what things are evidenced and what things are not. And then you can look at both theories and see out of all the actual physical evidence you have, which one of those theories is saying the most and how much of it actually connects to the point. So go ahead.
Mine's is more of like a house, even though I'm gonna have to say two of my things that I would bring up. But it's housekeeping just to make sure that I understand what realm we're speaking in, right? So like clearly like carbon dating would be something that falls in the realm of science, right? And so then there's like science versus pseudoscience ideas around carbon dating. But are we also talking about, because earlier when we were having conversation, I brought up like people creating false terminology or false etymology of words, but clearly like spelling and the lexicon is not necessarily in the realm of science. But is that a part of what we're discussing tonight? Like those kinds of activities as well, is my question.
Yes, so pseudo-linguistics counts in this, yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Hey, can I speak on that? Let me know when I can speak, man. It's Jesus. Let me know when I can speak. I'm in the cut.
You know what? You're such a good example, brother. Go ahead.
All right, check this out. I heard her saying something about the speaking the language. But did I just get done speak? Did I just get done talking about that in here? I don't even know because I had turned my phone off. Was it in here or was I somewhere else? And I was talking about the form of the alphabets, how they was even formed, the origin of the words. Basically, I was okay. All the books, doesn't matter what book we talking about, the Bible, the Quran, any book we getting information from, they was written by somebody with hands and feet like me and you. So that clearly shows us, without a reasonable doubt, these words we created. Us, I said we created as humans, our ancestors. We created these words. You feel what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, if we created these words, that means you created that word God too. That word God, that word God doesn't stand for nothing but the highest frequency of awareness. That's what your ancestors wrote it for you a long time ago. And this is how crazy it is. Listen how real it is. If you was at the highest frequency of awareness, you wouldn't need no words to communicate. We can all cam up right now and we can have a whole full-blown conversation without even moving our mouths. The first language was body language, sign language. That's when you was at the highest peak of your origin. That's when you knew you was really God's because you communicated like that. This language, this written down form of alphabets, you feel what I'm saying? This is like the second hand knowledge. This is like we made this, we made this language up for people that couldn't translate on our level. So basically, I ain't trying to be funny, but this is like, you feel what I'm saying, for the retarded versions of us. Like they couldn't get it. They was lower class. So we gave them to them in textbook. That's why this is like secondhand knowledge. So I look at it like this. How do you ever even think you're gonna learn some new knowledge from secondhand knowledge that's been written down centuries ago? Your ancestors that had the books, recycle them, going through them, still ain't find it. Now you doing the same shit and wondering why you can't find no new knowledge. Because you're searching at the wrong spots, the wrong peak of knowledge. You're not even going at the peak where it started. We all know where it started at, right where the source is, the spiritual realm. Science
Exactly. Thank you for
plus
that.
religion equals spirituality. And I'm done with that. You good.
Okay.
Okay.
I will
So
disagree with that last part. Um, but
disagree with a decent amount of that.
yeah, a lot of it. But I was just gonna focus on the last part. But if you did, if you really quickly let Balboa go, we could go straight to you.
Okay.
You should.
All right.
Um. So yeah. So I was assuming that versus statements, like making statements. I didn't think we were here to make statements. I thought we were here to introduce like things that we feel fall in either realm of science or pseudoscience and why. And you know what I mean? So that sounded like a statement, but I didn't really hear like where it falls in that realm of science versus pseudoscience. But that being said, the things that I would enter are like the thing that I mentioned with carbon dating, for instance. And actually, Trolla was a part of a conversation where we had this debate where people are claiming that carbon dating isn't real or valid and that it is quote unquote the white man's information, while simultaneously referring to other pieces of information as their source of how they validate things. Because this is the question that was asked. All right, okay, so if you don't use carbon dating, then what do you use? And they refer to something else, like for instance the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is only valid because they were able to carbon date those things to know that they had a certain age that would make them useful in, for instance, biblical doctrine references, right? So how are you saying carbon dating isn't a thing, doesn't make any sense, but then you're saying you use information that has been validated by carbon dating? So that's what I wanted to put out. That is it's something that happens regularly on this app. And then, are we listing multiple things, or are we just doing round robin, one at a time, one thing at a time? Or
I'm looking at it. That's why everybody keep acting like they don't know what the hell going on. That's why you
Wait,
lost.
hold on, brother.
'Cause you
Hold
still
on, brother. Hold on, brother. It's not your go. No, we it's just, like I said, it's just gonna be an open conversation. You can put out whatever information that you wanna address, and then whoever wants to address that can address that or add on to it, whatever y'all want to do with it. Um, with that being said, we was gonna go to Fusion. I think Trolla had something to say as well, and then we're gonna go to him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was
so
just
we can pretty much go through
oh,
everything that you have if you have multiples, and we can do it scientifically and actually um, research further in on that information, like carbon dating itself. If you have carbon dating, the moon landing, and the flat Earth, then
ooh,
we can go into all three of them and actually pull the research and the available scientific, credible um, data, and we can also go into um, the not 100% in science also. So that's a thing too. But yes, we can go into detail on each individual.
what's the not 100% in science?
Like in, for example, in carbon dating, it's not giving you a 100% exact pinpoint
Oh,
year.
yes,
yeah, but
yes.
it's the best form of dating that we have. Now, water dating is pretty cool though, but carbon dating is one of the best form of dating. It's not. I mean, a lot of the ways that you check old things, none of it is 100%. It's impossible for something to be 100%. It does give you an accuracy rate within a certain time period, like within 50 years or within 100 years or within this so and so. It just depends on what the artifact is that they're testing. But I agree with everything that Balboa said. I remember that conversation. People are using regular science, and what they do is they'll say, okay, this is not 100%, but they're not going and investigating what it means not to be 100% accurate. On top of the fact they're using the same information, or they're using it when it's convenient for them. Like if they're trying to suggest that
Mhm.
their religion is good, they'll say, okay, this book is this time period, or these people came from that time period. You can check these tablets. And it's like, wait a minute, how did you check those tablets and find out that they came from that? Are you just saying it based on what you read? Because if you're doing it based on what you read, more than likely the science behind it was carbon dating or some form of dating. And either way it goes, if you check any form of dating, none of it is 100% accurate. as far as year, but the time period is usually accurate to the time period that it suggests. And that's good enough right there for most people who understand science. Also, I think it's pseudoscience to say that science is white or black or any racial. You know, there was certain things that white people put in history that could have been classified as a form of science, like the Egyptians were white, the five race theory, these type of things. Those weren't science. That was actual pseudoscience. It was somebody's opinion. It was written letters or a suggestion from I forgot what the German dude named Fredrickson or something like that. But either way it goes, these were all historical suggestions, but they weren't science at all. So when people say white science, there is no such thing as white science. Science either has to be proven or debunked. You know, and either way it goes, if it's repetitive, then it shouldn't even be taught. If it's objective science, then it shouldn't even be. Anybody shouldn't be able to just come and start talking against it when it's already been proven over and over and over again.
Right. So that also speaks to the 100% or the not 100% is basically something that a pseudoscientific person would use to discredit something like carbon dating, because the um the the subjective aspect and the pseudoscientific part, let's say that that thing is the Bible or even that person's conceptualization of God itself, is 100% on that side. That's where you go to get the 100% is normally into the um, subjective space, because if you it's that's why if you can't prove that it's not the case, then it's the case type of stuff exists in that space, which is not the case in science. So yes, in relation to the 100%, it doesn't have to be 100%. 90% of something, or actually, if you're 70% sure about something, that's actually pretty good. There's a functional percentage that you get to at a certain point, and I'm pretty sure that carbon dating is actually over the 90% um, precise range, which means if it's 50,000 years old, which is how long it takes for carbon to, let's say, decay, um, it's just like if you was watching an ice cube in a room, basically, and you left that ice cube and you left out the room and you came back and you knew it was it's an hour past. Like if you sat and watched the ice cube first and you know it takes an hour for that ice cube to melt. And if you go outside the room and come back and the ice cube is only halfway melted, that means 30 minutes has passed. Or if you
Mm.
come back in the room and the ice cube is completely melted, you might not actually know how many years, how much time has passed, but you know at least an hour has passed because the ice cube is completely melted. So the information that you have for a timeline in relation to that is still valuable at all kind of ranges of accuracy. Said somebody else was next, Issa.
I'm gonna be honest between people coming in and the gifts, and thank everybody for all the gifts. I lost track of who was next, to be very honest. Um, but if you want to just start off with one of the pseudo topics you want to start with, and we can start discussing one of those, that'll be fun because I know I got a couple.
Okay. Um, so I know you had the slave trade. Um, we had astrology versus astronomy, which we kind of went into a little bit. And we have flat Earth, which is a pretty easy one. We definitely have the ancient aliens, um, but we also have melanin versus carbon, also. So I could I could start there.
Well, can I really quickly, because I feel like this is like really easy to debunk, and I just want to get it over with off the top. This slave trade does not exist then, right? The transatlantic slave trade does not exist. And I wanted to start with this one because I actually have some uplifting information for the people in the back that have emotional ties to this history, right? So, in the way that I decided to debunk the transatlantic slave trade not being real is to just show up with some information about some rebellions that happened on the ships, right?
Mhm.
So, I think I know everybody heard of Amistad before. It happened in 1839, but there was also a Creole one that happened in 1841. Enslaved individuals aboard the Creole Revolt and took control of the ship, ultimately sailing to the Bahamas, where they were granted asylum because the Bahamas was an asylum island. Clotilda also, and the Clotilda, I forget which museum it's in, but you can actually visit this slave ship as well. While not a revolt entirely in the traditional sense, the arrival of the Clotilda and its subsequent illegal slave trade led to significant resistance and the formation of African community in Mobile, Alabama. We have Gustavus in 1800s, who revolted during their voyage, but the details aren't as documented as compared to the others. So we have a lot of these rebellions that was happening on board the ship, which would be very hard to do if the thing wasn't happening at all. So I just wanted to start with that. So at least we'll have some positivity as well as debunking happening at the same time. Thanks. And again, thank y'all for the gifts.
Right. So okay. So I have information already on a few of these, and we can go into looking up further information. Um, so on the slave trade, basically, and I think sometimes the argument in the slave trade is that it didn't happen in the numbers that were said to have happened. Generally, the person doesn't give the number they're talking about. But if you're saying that the slave trade was 200 million Africans came from Africa, then yes, that would be extreme um, and incorrect. So whether it happened at all is the thing that seems to go pretty heavily south. So all the way south to that Pangea existed back during the slave trade, and that's how two sets of African descended people got on two separate continents because they sat there while Pangea was happening. And then that goes into more um, unscientific knowledge about when Pangea was and what that is. So that theory it does kind of go pretty far at its extremes. But I think some of them, I think at its moderate spots, it's basically that the slave trade didn't happen in as huge in numbers or for as long a time, which would that the time frame is pretty clear and the numbers are pretty clear. But it also comes down to it how many of us would be descendants of Africans, basically. So, which in this case, I would say quite a large amount. So that's pretty much where the arguments come from when I hear the arguments. So I do have I'll run some quick info on the transatlantic slave trade. I have one. All right. So,
Yeah, I think that this is a pretty major one. And I feel like the importance of it is it's nobody's right to tell someone else's story, right? Like if you want to live in whatever space you want to live in as far as what your heritage, ethnicity, and lineage is, that's what you should do. That's your right, right? And that's just and proper. but you shouldn't be speaking on other people's stories, right? Because there are people who lean into that story and say, yeah, they know their lineage, their story, where they came from, and how that manifested. And part of that is the out of Africa transatlantic slave trade story. And it's just, I think it's disingenuous for all the reasons you guys highlighted, but it's also dangerous rhetoric when you're speaking against us, a whole people's history. So I
I
just
agree
wanted to
with
put
that.
that.
I'm thinking when people suggest that the larger number of people came from Africa, and you have scholars like Dane Calloway or you have Henry Louis Gates, because Henry Louis Gates definitely studied this in detail. He actually has plenty of specials on this, and they have all the records from slave ships and all of this stuff. There's no way that the numbers are correct when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade. I've never heard the argument that transatlantic slave trade was false completely. I've never heard that one. Or the Pangea thing. Humans weren't even around for Pangea. It was millions of years. Pangea is happened millions of years. Now, plate tectonics, if you understand plate tectonics, then you understand that most of those continents are pretty much those continents over there, when it comes specifically to Asia, Europe, and Africa, are on the same continental divide. By definition, they will all be the same continent. There is no Africa, there is no Asia or Europe. They, by definition, will be the same place. They put a Suez Canal in between some parts of Africa and what would be considered Asia. And there's a small gap in between Morocco and the Iberian Peninsula, which would be Europe. Other than that, all of those places are pretty much the same. So people have been going to and fro from there for since the beginning of humanity. This is why it's hard to pinpoint anybody to one particular continent or not, because that by definition those places will be the same continent. And where we find the earliest human remains are right in the middle of all of that. It's like right there in that basin. Some of it's in Asia. Some of it, most of them are in Africa, but those areas are the same area. And if any species of humanity traveled at that time, where we found the bones at, wouldn't be synonymous with where they came from in the first place. So the whole argument of out of Africa is pseudo as fuck. It is pseudo. The whole situation is pseudo, because all we can say is we found bones here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. And the place wasn't even called Africa until way later on. But that's semantics. But I'm talking about the actual positioning of these people and where they moved to for where they migrated to as a group or as smaller species in order to get food. We have zero idea how that happened. That's why out of Africa is considered a theory. So it's not actual science, but saying it, I mean, it's science behind it. I'll take that back. It's actual science behind it, but saying it's a fact is also crazy that we for sure came out of there. Saying that a couple 100 million people came from transatlantic slavery over to the Americas, and there's no proof of indigenous melanated people over here is also pseudoscience. A lot of that shit is pseudoscience. Some of the ship stuff that they say about the ships that they use in order to transfer people here, pseudoscience. Like they can't be recreated right now. And because we can't recreate it, it has to be considered pseudo. And we're talking about with the science of that time. We're not talking about if we created cruise ships now with the capabilities that we have today, that we can take this many people and lodge them into a ship and ship them 18 to 22 hours this way to an island, and then a couple more days on a boat this way, or to Portugal, and then straight to the Americas. All of those people, it's called impossible, literally. But this is the story we've been told, and we believed it based on the Alex Haley book. For Black people, we believed it based on the Alex Haley book, and Alex Haley plagiarized his shit. So later on, we found out that story was fake. I'm done.
Okay. So you were right. This is a theory, which is not pseudoscientific and not really just a theory in the out of Africa aspect. And that's more there will be less evidence in relation to the time period, but also plenty of evidence and studies. But as far as the ships go, that's not a pseudoscientific theory. That's or pseudo historical. That is from ship logs and manifests. Like I said, I have stuff in these sections, so I'll read something here. Um, Ship logs and manifests are the most direct pieces of evidence showing the arrival of slave ships, even in America. Records kept by ship's crew members, captains, detailed informations, a number of enslaved and transported um, Africans, the conditions of the voyage, the ports, departures, and arrivals, and enslaved individuals upon them. There's references would be the Transatlantic Slave Database, which is one of the largest databases where that information is, and then you have actual names of some even famous slave ships. One would be um, the Clotilda, the Wanderer, 1858, Amistad, 1839. Um, we have eyewitness accounts in personal diaries as well. Several eyewitness accounts provide further proof and arrival of slave ships. Firsthand accounts of ship captains, physical evidence in archaeological surveys, such as the San Jose shipwreck. San Jose was a Portuguese shipwreck that sank off the coast of South Africa. Um, Cultural and genetic evidence, even though when we won't go into the well, actually, we can go into the genetic testing and things like that, and not just the 23andMe stuff. Um, but genetic and cultural evidence, such as and cultural evidence as far as even the music that's played and created by African Americans, so called today. So there's evidence to a degree that at least there is much historical evidence and scientific evidence that we can point to it to say that slave ships themselves aren't a pseudo thing. Now, to say that 100 million or 200 million Africans came over, there's little to no evidence of that. But to say that 2 million came over or 10 million came over, and not just to America, not directly to America. So we also have to remember that the Middle Passage goes up through the Caribbean. You would have had more Africans landing in the Caribbean and Brazil, which we can see that today. But then also those there were trade ports all the way from Brazil up to America. So you didn't have to necessarily land in America. All of them didn't have to land in America in order to end up in America or in the United States rather. So that's the logical and scientific way of looking at that. It's not that it's 100 million, and it's not that it didn't happen at all, but the numbers were still significant enough for a highly significant amount of Africans today to be descended from that group of people.
Yeah, I think that's the part that's in question. The slave ships itself is not in question. Plus, you didn't. I don't think you have to go look at the numbers of all them ships. They had 72 ships manifest. Dane Calloway has all of them, right? And every seven, you named a couple of them, but I know 72 of them, right? 72. And all of them are from the 1800s. You don't have any from the 1600s, from the from the 1600s, 1700s. Most of the ships that we know about come from either the late 1700s and 1800s. This is almost at the end of the transatlantic slave. And if you really think about it, they stopped the transatlantic slave, I want to say in the early 1800s. The slave ships it was illegal to even move slave ships at that point. So we all know, well, I want to say 1700s. Matter of fact, it was 1700s because in 1865, when they wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, people think that's when they ended transatlantic slavery. No, they had ended transatlantic slavery over 100 years prior to that. I usually remember the day, but I forgot it. And I want to say it's in the 1700s, 1725, somewhere around there. So they stopped the ships. So the ships that you guys are talking about, they're either illegal ships because they were still illegally moving slaves at that time period. That's not debatable, but they were illegally moving slaves. And seeing that they illegally moved slaves, being that we most people agree that they illegally moved slaves after the transatlantic slavery started, right? So I mean, there's proof that he just showed the proof by even naming those ships. But with that being said, that means that those people were illegally finding melanated people in order to enslave for extra money because people were humans, black humans were commodity at that time. That means if you can find them anywhere else, anywhere, it'd be like finding marijuana growing wild. You can bring them back and get money off of them. So that means that there prior to that, there had to be a bulk of people, the majority of people in these islands and on this continent right here, on this country right here, had to be already enslaved previous to the illegal enslavers who are picking up illegals. So now you go to the manifest of those boats, you start seeing it's not thousands of people. It's not 1,000, 2,000. It's only a couple hundred, and most of them died on their way here. So you're talking about 30, 40 people getting off of a boat. So now you're looking at those
Thank
numbers
you.
dwindle. So people concentrate
Yeah.
on if there were boats or not. They're not concentrating on when the boats came, which is at the end of slavery and illegally because the slave trade had already been shut down, not just in America, but globally in the 1700s.
So we talking
Wait,
about
So
hold
like
on.
here's
Wait,
my
hold on,
who
Bradley.
qualifies for
Hold on, Bradley.
reparations?
Hold on, Bradley. Hold on, Bradley. No, no, that's not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about, we're
yeah.
all bringing up pseudo ideas that we feel are pseudos, and we're combining it with facts. Right now, on the pseudo idea of the transatlantic slave show not being real. Trolla is speaking about the number of people that were being brought across over from Africa, if that number is inflated or not. But before you go, Fusion, can Balboa say something? And I'll also raise my hand as well. And then we're going to go back to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just um
Oh, and then
gonna
Bradley, I got you on the list.
so I'm gonna keep it 100. I probably only listened to like 3 Dan Calloway broadcasts, and it's specifically because I took issue with the methods of how he's expressing the information and not providing supporting information for all the things that he's claiming, right? And so it's a method of argument fallacy that's like an example of an argument fallacy that he really leans into is like that it's incredible. Like, oh, can you believe that they tried to claim that? It just doesn't make any sense. And that's actually not an argument for anything, right? So, but there's a professor that goes through Dan Calloway's claims and debunks some of the claims that he makes with what to me seems like sound information, right? And I'm not saying everything that Dan Calloway ever has said is false, but certainly some of it is false, including the stupid soundbite that he uses, along with, I think it's like an eagle, but the soundbite is a hawk. That's irritating to me, but that's really neither here nor there. I just wanted to make an attack on that. But so yeah, it's just like where the pseudoscience versus science is concerned, then you have a whole body of influencers, misinformation, conspiracy theory that people use to back up and that's not an attack towards you, Trolla. It's just towards those claims, right? Including how we got to that. I actually have heard people say the slave trade didn't exist at all. They really have fallen into the space that all melanated people that are here, that are considered foundational Black Americans, were never on a slave ship. They are the original indigenous natives from this land, and that their name just got switched. I've heard that argument more than once on this app. And to me, that's wild, especially because I have a friend who traveled, I think she went to Ghana, either Ghana or Nigeria, right? Where on the shore there, they have the port where slaves were kept, and the floor is made out of feces because they were just keeping their shitting in that space and not allowing them to move out of that building until they were put on these ships to be shipped, right? And and she went there and she has video of being there, right? So the story on that side of the Atlantic is the story of these people that were enslaved and shipped from that spot. So yeah, I clearly don't believe the people that are saying nobody ever was enslaved and brought through the transatlantic slave trade. So, but this information that is out there from different bodies of, whether influencers or whatever, is part of how people are now spreading misinformation. So that being said, I feel like it would be a good effort, especially since we're doing this, to kind of create a space where we could tag the claim and the backup information for why that's not really fucking what's going on. Sorry, excuse my language. You know what I mean? Let's do it, because
Well,
it's
I named
frustrating to
Dan
me.
Calloway because he's the most popular one out of the bunch. And majority of people
Okay,
who don't actually
that's
study this, they
that's
know
fine,
him,
Chola. Hold
but
on
they
though.
don't know like oh
I get it.
God.
And hold on though. Hold on though. I got you. I got you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give my spot to Rep, and I'm gonna go after Bradley. So it's gonna
Okay.
be Rep, Fusion, Bradley, me, and then Chola. If you want to come back with whatever you wanted to say, we can do that.
Okay. The first question is, before I start speaking on my
Wait,
stance, is
hold on, real quick. I said Rep Bradley. We gotta
oh,
go. I'm
okay, my
sorry. I
bad.
said Rep
Thank you.
Fusion, then Bradley. No problem, hon.
Thank you, Isha. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was going to say I'm glad Trolla did bring up uh, that gentleman, Dane Calloway, because uh, more important, I know in the conscious community, a lot of people do refer to him as being absolutely pseudo. And I was going to lead in with, I know when I lost interest in him was when he had articulated that uh, Harriet Tubman didn't exist. And I wanted to introduce that to another as another aspect of something that we could look into as to whether or not anybody's done any research to identify if the story of Harriet Tubman was completely salacious or actually accurate. But to the point of him articulating that the slave trade didn't occur the way that we've come to know it, he had given a lot of rationale as to the likelihood of that many people being compacted in such a small space and surviving the gaseous fumes of their own excrement and things of that nature. Um, and so I wanted to pose it as a question to the
Cool.
panel. Had anybody gone down that path, identified any scientifically provable evidence or of the likelihood of any of those claims?
So I didn't personally go down that path, but I did moderate and do Q&A for a panel
It's
for
crazy.
the movie that came out in, I'm not sure what's crazy in the middle of my sentence, but for the movie that came out in 2019, where the filmmakers did a panel talking about the research that they did in order to prepare for the movie, and including the fact that, yeah, for the movie purposes, there's certain things that they had to, like, they said a certain way to fill holes or whatever the case may be, but they talked about the things that were factual and that they could confirm about Harriet Tubman. But so it's just is wild to me. People are just like, yeah, she's a complete, work of fiction. So yeah.
Trolla, if you want to answer the Harriet Tubman question, you
I
can, because
clearly I should have been
Rep
able to answer
asked
before
the
because
question.
all I want to say is this, right? So the claim is, did Harriet Tubman free the slaves? No, she did not. Harriet Tubman was working for the Northern Troops. There is proof that there was a person with that name. That, first of all, that's not really her real name anyway. But that name was lodged in as somebody who was helping free the slaves. The people who actually done the research on that knows that, right? But she also received a pension. This is how we know this person actually existed, whether it is that person existed in the way that they tell in the fairy tales of her. There's a lot of proof that story is kind of false. Same thing with there's other stories I can go down, but it's somebody else's turn. We can come back to that.
Fusion is on you.
Okay, I thought Bradley was. That's right, it's me. So
For you.
yeah. So all right, that's a lot. All right. So Harriet Tubman was a real person. There are embellishments, and no, Harriet Tubman wasn't her actual name or whatever. But that's a real person. Um, Back to the slave ships, and we can go into Harriet Tubman pretty much next. It'll actually segue time wise right into where we need to be anyway. But out of slave ships, there are estimated 39,000 slave voyages throughout the transatlantic slave trade. So, in the Dane Calloway way of saying, where you couldn't fit that many people on a ship and all that stuff, um, it's between 100 to 300 people per ship a lot of the times. And you would have to also multiply that by thousands of voyages over hundreds of years, because we have, when this is another thing that's of information you won't get with something that is somewhat pseudo historic, like the way Dan Calloway would present information, basically. So, in slave ships wise, you have the White Lion, 1619, Dockton, Virginia. Okay. So any statement made that slave ships didn't start coming to the Americas till the late 1700s or the 1800s, it would be historically inaccurate. So now,
Wow.
whatever number you were doing with the only started in the 18 or 1700s, then now you have to take another 100 or 200 years into that worth of time to get the actual number. And now your numbers will be in the millions, maybe not 20 or 30 million or 100 million, but now those numbers are in the millions, and a significant amount of people, for a very significant amount of people today to be descended from those millions from the 1600s up to the 1800s, after slavery was um, the import of slaves. So that didn't. So there's another thing about the transatlantic slave trade ending at the 1700s or 1800s or early 1800s. You have the British Slave Trade Act, probably 1807 or something like that. But that was more so the import of slaves was legal. So you could still breed slaves. And this also goes to the point of how there would be a significant amount of Black Americans today descended from those slaves, not just from the import, but when the import was outlawed, slavery was still allowed. So, like you spoke, Trolla, of the commodity of Black people, especially Black women and young Black girls. That's actually what the Dred Scott case is about. It's not even about Dred Scott. It's about his three daughters, and that's the reason that um, the old white lady didn't want to give him his freedom, even though he saved up enough money working as a slave to buy enough to buy his freedom for himself and his family. But Dred Scott at that time was an older man, so he wasn't even a young buck or valuable. He was valuable, but he wasn't a young buck or nothing like that. Or he was knowledgeable, but he had three daughters and a wife. And that was extremely valuable at the time, because since you couldn't import new slaves, the only thing you could do was breed them, because that was legal. So that would also speak to how the numbers get to where they are. And in relation to the 1 million that came in, and then heavy breeding throughout that time. And then even in freedom, we breed heavily. So in relation to the time period, that the slave trade started or that ships started docking. First one is 1619 Virginia. So if we're going to do the numbers on it and try to calculate it, which is not a number that I've heard Dane Calloway say, um, then we have to start with that number. And we have to look at the 39,000, not just 78 voyages. We have to look at 39,000 voyages throughout the slave trade and the amount of those, the thousands that would have come to the Americas and the United States. And then we start to look at the numbers, and you'll start to see that the numbers are more in the millions. And at the time, there weren't 300 million people in America. So breeding over time, over another few hundred years, and this is the other thing, we're remembering that this is over hundreds of years. So from 1619 to up to 1919, that's a whole 300 right there. And um, Europeans were already in America 100 years before that. So it's um, there's that part, and then there's also the pirating. Just because the slave trade ended, the white people became very good smugglers and things. So the amount that to assume that the amount even dropped significantly because there's a law being enforced at that time, and then there's the enforcement of that law. So Britain can imply that law, and that's only in British territories also. So Britain can imply the Slave Trade Act where you're not allowed to import slaves anymore. But enforcing that law is different. And then keeping the people from pirating that and everything. So you still have income coming in. You still have an influx coming in after that time, and you have a higher influx after the Revolutionary War, because that's also one of the things that the Revolutionary War was about preserving slavery, because that was one of the things that was the main thing that made the America you have today even have the resources, finances, gold, um, production that it had to even separate from Britain in the first place. So the slave trade itself is highly connected in Black and American history to a degree where the level that Dane Calloway dismisses things like Harriet Tubman and the slave trade and the boats and things like that is in a highly pseudo historic way.
That's yeah. I completely agree. Bradley, we're gonna go to you, and then Bradley, Trolla, Balboa, Purple.
You can hear me? All right. I don't need, this is quite an interesting subject because it doesn't really get spoken about a lot on various panels. Usually we talk about slavery and the effects, the supposed effects of slavery on and black individuals, but pseudoscience involving slavery. Only thing I can really refer to that wise is scientific racism, when apparently there were white scientists that did experiments on black people, like the Tuskegee experiment, or the Venus Hottentot of the 1800s, the woman with the big booty back in the 1800s, or her, or yeah, I can't really. I mean, I don't want this to be the end of my term, and please don't cut me off. But when it comes to pseudoscience, I thought that was more of the lines of like astrology and acupuncture, stuff like that. I didn't know you can apply pseudoscience to slavery. I didn't know that. That's pretty new to me. I mean, if we want to talk about pseudoscience, I think that would be more the lines of the Holocaust, because the Holocaust is usually denied often. It's denied a lot. There are a lot of Holocaust deniers that deny that the Holocaust even existed. I've never, until today, have ever heard that slavery never existed. I've never heard that before. I've never heard that example used. I've never, like, I just don't understand how could anybody say that slavery did exist and there's still plantation homes that are built to this day that stand, even though they're no longer active, or they're most likely museums. Um, there are literally death camps and extermination camps that are still around today that you could take tours on in Eastern Europe. I just feel like I I wouldn't. I've never heard. I mean, I've never even heard the fact that apparently Harriet Tubman wasn't really Harriet Tubman. I mean, what was her name then? Karen Johnson? I'm just saying. I've never heard that before. The only thing I can really relate to that is I know the fact that Frederick Douglass, a lot of people revere Frederick Douglass, but I don't think that they would revere the fact that Frederick Douglass married a white man. No, excuse me, married a white woman right before he died. He was with a white woman. Was Frederick Douglass was with a white woman, married to a white woman right before he died. But that's neither here or there. I mean, I yeah, I'm gonna listen in more on this conversation about pseudoscience. But yeah, I think pseudoscience could be more taken into place when it comes to things like the Holocaust rather than slavery. I mean, there are victims of the Holocaust that are still alive today. Matter of fact, you can see there are many people that you can literally see the physical marks of the Holocaust on their arm. They have their branded number on their arm. I can't find anybody that has whiplashings on their back that's alive today. I can't find no one. I can't. So, I mean, that's quite an interesting way. I mean, I thought, like I said, I thought pseudoscience was used for
Oh my God,
astrology.
man. You just gonna repeat the same stuff over and over. Pass the mic. God damn it. You just holding on to the mic. You're not even on subject. Look, if we going around, because I'm gonna forget everything everybody said, because I don't know why. Like, this is ridiculous. This man don't even know what this. He completely off the subject. Nobody was talking. I don't think one person brought up the Holocaust, even though that's debatable. Just like the stuff that Fusion is saying is completely debatable. You guys are concentrating on Dane Calloway because Dane Calloway is a social media presence. He's the most popular person. I also named another person. His name is Henry Louis Gates. Henry Louis Gates actually believe in most of the stuff that y'all believe in, except he has found tangible proof and had, I said this already, many specials about showing manifestos, all of these things to show exactly how many people were getting off a boat at what time period. I mean, the whole thing about the 1600s and you guys having proof that there was these numbers in the 1600s, that's laughable because nobody has that. If they did, the argument would be over. It would be no argument. Yeah, there wasn't 300 million people in United States of America, but when you count the Caribbeans and you count Brazil and you count South America, there was well over that during the 1600s, 1800s, 1700s of melanated people in these regions, as we can tell. Like I don't think we're not even the most populated country of um, blacks or I don't know how you Afroid people outside of Africa. So that's in South America. South America has more blacks outside of Africa than anywhere else on this planet. So with that being said, those people didn't just get there through osmosis. And then you guys saying that they have this tangible proof, they don't. They have proof that boats happen. And I don't think one person's debating that. Even Dane Calloway, who is like Dane Calloway is like going all the way to the left. You see what I'm saying? Like he's the exaggeration and radical of these theories. And you guys use him because he's easy to go after. He's a personality. But then when it comes to people like Henry Louis Gates, y'all stay away from those type of people because these are scholars and science majors. So they actually went through this. And he's one thing that Bradley did say is right is none of this has anything to do with pseudoscience. This is all history. And as we all know, I wish I could, because I'm really getting my family ready right now. And I was looking for a book while I was trying to get my toddler ready. And I got one of the books out, but I got all my books packed right now. And I have the 100 Amazing Facts About a Negro with Complete Proof, right? It's a cheap book. It's a very cheap book. I think everybody would profit off of having that book, because some of the stuff that's in that book is things that a lot of people don't know about the transatlantic slave trade or just slavery in itself. It's on Amazon. It's like $5, literally. Hold on, let me
Say the
try
name.
to. Hold on, I'm gonna show it to y'all right now. If I'm touching my screen, but because my hands are wet, it won't let me open my camera or something. This is crazy.
While he's doing that, I just wanted to welcome everybody for coming into the panel. Just so we don't get stuck on why it's called science versus pseudoscience. The conversation originally was going to be of the more scientific aspect. I just brought up the fact that you can literally put pseudo in front of anything. So like pseudo literally means giving out false information on whatever said subject is. So if it's pseudoscience, pseudo history, pseudo spiritual, you can do that with anything, right? I just started off the
Uh,
conversation with the slave trade because that was something that I wanted to debunk. So just so everybody don't
Well,
just
the
get
reason the
focused
reason why
on
I was saying
the
what I was
word
saying is
pseudo.
history can't be pseudo. It can only be told by the victors. So like, we could take history for however we want to. It's literally told by the victors. We all know that. And that's why I kind of agree with what Bradley was saying. This is where I was going with that. You guys are using the word pseudo however you want to, but you're using it in a pseudo way. On top of that, history is just a repeating of what people witnessed at that time period. But when it's given to you by a group of people who won in that time period or want to paint a particular picture, then it could be changed. I mean, like, how many generations did we think that most of Egypt was white? You know what I mean? So there was that. So we have a bunch of history that has been painted a different way. That's not pseudo. That's misdirection. It's just lies. It's just lies on top of lies. It's not pseudo. So I want to separate the two things. When you're talking about pseudoscience, you're talking about people who believe in astrology more than they believe in astronomy. Those are two different things. One of them is pure science, where it's the study of said thing, and another one is somebody looking at something and coming up with their own thought process when it's based off of some form of science and expounding on it as if it's true, and it's based on belief systems. That's not what history is. History is facts. It's facts, but
Right.
it could be
Right,
changed by
right.
the
But that's
person who
not what we're saying
authored those
here.
facts.
Because like somebody
No, I
saying
wasn't saying
that
about
the
what you were
slave,
saying. I was just agreeing with Bradley
yeah,
when he
but
was saying about the Holocaust. Like, we don't know how many numbers the Holocaust victims had, because Israel clearly
right,
is
that's
the
one
winner in this
thing.
situation.
That's a
Yeah,
conversation to be had, right? Or even the conversation that you and Fusion were having, well, what are the exact numbers? Those are conversations to be had. But there's
yeah.
literal people that are out there saying that like the slave trade never existed, period. That's a
Who is
conversation I had
saying
with
that?
someone.
I know, but
Yeah, but
I
who's
want to get to
saying
my
that?
point
Right.
because it was my
So
turn. Hold on,
that's
I want to get to my point real quick though, because the
oh yeah,
reason
yeah.
why I
Go
even
ahead. You want
said
to talk
that.
about the book? Go ahead. And then it's
No,
going
no,
to
no. I just
Balboa
wanted to
Coco.
close out. The reason why I said that, right? Because I am getting ready. The reason why I was even going that route with it, it wasn't to talk about the actual panel. It's the fact that Henry Louis Gates, when he does determinations, he does look at the fact that some of this information is coming from unreliable resources. Like some of the stuff that we're naming even right now, that the resource that is coming from are not reliable. These are people who want to paint a picture a certain kind of way for whatever reason that they're doing it. It's the same thing that Shakanta Jawab had to do when he went through his anthropology and archaeology experience. He had to go back and look at the people who were giving out information and ask himself, why did they give out false information? Or why are they giving me this information in general? So some of the information that we have, like how many people on or this boat was around, there's no actual ships that you can physically see, like no tangible proof, no nothing like that. There's no, leftover proof. There is some from the 1800s, like I said, but 1600s and 1700s is ridiculous, because this has been a debatable thing for so many generations for people who now are saying, I know for a fact it's this, because they want to be out of Africa, whereas there's other people who want to be out of America. They have to exaggerate what they know in order to completely sell everybody on the majority of people being from America originally. So both parties are exaggerating on that emphasis. But that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, appreciate you. So we're
Okay.
going to oh wait, hold on, Fusion. Because we're going to Balboa and Purple, because Purple raised her hand mad long ago. We just now get to her. And then I kind of gave my spot up a couple of times. So I'm not gonna put a time limit on Balboa or Purple or anything like that, because I know y'all want to say what y'all want to say. But let's try to make what we're saying within 3 to 4 minutes, so people don't lose their thoughts. Please try not to put like 10 facts at a time on one turn, because it's going to be hard to be able to hear that with 3 other people doing the same exact thing. So with that being said, we're going to go to Balboa, we're going to go to Purple, and then we're going to go to me. And then Fusion, and then I think I've seen somebody else's hand, but we'll start all over.
So yeah, I definitely had to create a mnemonic in my head of Harriet Tubman holding a book about pseudo on a ship, just so I could remember my 3 points. Because when you wait for everybody to do the round robin. But anyway, so yeah, I pulled up a video that I have of Cassie Lemons, who is the screenwriter and the director of the movie Harriet, talking about, I put it in the comments earlier, but talking about how they got their information, and they actually sourced interviews that were done with still living slaves at that point in time as how they approached telling the true story of Harriet, right? So that was just to the question. I think it was Rep that was asking, like, has anybody done the research? And I'm saying I haven't personally done the research, but I did hear the filmmaker talk about doing that research, right? That being said, where the ships are concerned, I did remember when the whole anniversary of 1619 came about, there was a lot of information that was being shared and made visible, some of which did have to do with, and I know I have it stored somewhere, I would have to dig to find. There's a museum, it's probably associated with the Clotilda finding, that claim to talk about the numbers, right? So I don't have them to reach into in my mind, because I just glanced at it briefly, but there is an accounting of what the numbers are supposed to be. Also, Rafiki made a good point that this doesn't have to be something that we assume there's no way to know, specifically because these slaves were considered property and cargo. They were not considered like human beings, and there was insurance policies even then attached to them. And so there was very intricate accounting. And those of you who sat with me when I did the live about women, white women owning slaves, right? And what they did with their slaves, specifically the black male slaves, in that, some of the evidence that, I forget the black woman's name who's doing this research and publicizing it, she talked about finding the accounts of and the records of like where these slaves were attained and how many they had, and it being a part of, government and legal compliance and filings that had to be done about who you owned, even where the census was concerned, like who lived here. She talked about that. So I think there are records. Now, whether the records are sufficient and complete and what margin of error exists in that, I don't know, right? But I don't agree with people that are saying there's no way to know, because that's not true, right? And as far as the pseudoscience, I feel like, kind of like Fusion was saying at the beginning, right? It all does fit in the pseudo versus pseudoscience, even though we might be talking about history or we might be talking about some other subject that doesn't seem to be science, because it's also about how you are approaching proving claims, right? How you're approaching understanding what the truth is. And there are definitely methods for that. And that is scientific. So I just want to, that's my thought on it. I land my plane.
Beautiful. We're going straight to purple.
Hi, I just have a couple questions because I'm kind of lost in the sauce. So, is the argument that slavery didn't exist, or that the amount of slaves brought over on ships is incorrect? And if that amount is incorrect, aside from Fusion mentioning breeding, where'd all these people come from?
So the original premise was that the slave trade wasn't real. The transatlantic slave trade wasn't real. So no slave boats, no everybody was enslaved in slavery were already here in America. That was the claim that I've heard. So it was something that I brought to the table for the pseudoscience conversation.
So we were indigenous people, and white people came over here and enslaved the indigenous people. That's the argument.
Yes.
Okay. And then the Harriet Tubman thing, I can't.
The,
I land my
Yes, the
plane.
um
pseudo part of so the pseudo is in the most, especially when you get to the most extreme. So that's kind of in where we were talking about it being more so pseudo historical in this case, and pseudo scientific in the manner that it doesn't, to get to that conclusion, doesn't follow the methods of evidence or empirical data and things like that, or it skips over some data and accepts other data. So yes, that's where we are.
yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
really quickly, for my turn, I kind of wanted to bring it back, and I'm kind of glad you said it again because the out of Africa theory. Oh my goodness. So for one, I want to start off by saying like, what are theories and what are scientific theories? Because I think that's an issue that we have every day. So with everyday use, theory can mean an unattested hunch or a guess without supporting evidence, or ideal or a hypothetical set of facts, right? But a scientific theory is well substantiated, a well substantiated explanation of natural world that based on the scientific method. So when we say something is a scientific theory, it's a little bit more than just it's a little bit of a hunch, right? And then also when it comes to the out of Africa idea, right? The oldest bones, 7 million years old. The hominin species, it originates in Africa. You don't find anything older outside of Africa. And that's what they mean by the out of African theory. Not so much so that the first people, all people come from there. But when we're talking about the hominin species, the predecessors to the human kind, it comes out of Africa. So that's what that means. So with that being said, you can either talk about the slave trade, you can talk about whatever it is, Harriet Tubman, or what said it's just been thrown in the mix. So right now we're going to fusion, and I see Chola, I saw Osaru, and that's it so far. Raise your hand if you want something, if you want to say something. Continue.
Okay, so we got a couple points. So we'll go back to the slave ship aspect just for a minute. Basically, there's the white lion, okay, which I just mentioned. So in having that evidence or having that information that can be cross-referenced um, in America, not landed in Caribbean, not landed in Brazil, in America, slave ship um, from the 1600s. So I'll give an account of, let me pull it up. Okay, so the White Line, August 1619. Okay. This event marked the beginning of the institutionalization of African slavery in what will become the United States. The White Lion was an English privateer ship licensed by the government to attack enemy ships, and it intercepted intercepted a Portuguese slave ship, um, the Jao, the Jao, off the coast of Mexico. So the evidence of the white lion in transatlantic slave trade. So there is John Rolfe's account. The primary historical evidence of the white lion's arrival comes from John Wolfe, a prominent settler and tobacco planter in Jamestown Colony. A letter written in 1619, Wolfe documented the arrival of the ship and the enslaved Africans. He noted the white lion brought 20 and odd Africans to Point Comfort, which is near Jamestown. There are quotes from his letters. There are also Portuguese records to further confirm that. So, in relation to the White Lion and many other slave ships from the 1619 on up, which isn't including pirated and illegal and not under the radar ships. That's how far we have to go back. So again, we can't start the slave trade in the 1800s or the late 1700s. Definitely no time after the Revolutionary War. So again, the Revolutionary War is now possible after hundreds so odd years of transatlantic slave trade. That's how it's able to become its own nation. So we'll go from that into Harriet Tubman. So the thing with Harriet Tubman, which is wow, because it's taken some information like the fact that she worked with the Union Army, and automatically means she didn't free any slaves, or the fact that that's not her real name, which all three of those things are the case simultaneously. So as a person has a lifespan. So from the 1820s or 1840s up to the 1860s, yes, for Harriet Tubman, what's her real name? Meta Ross. Meta is for, I'd have to look up the exact name that Meta is, but let's say Meta Ross. It would be Harriet Tubman, or the person we know as Harriet Tubman. So let me grab some information here on Harriet Tubman. And she was also married, so she had another name. So Tubman is the name that we know. But this one person lived, and there are accounts of this person, including the working with the Union. So we have Harriet Tubman's work being freeing enslaved people is documented through historical and personal accounts of those that she helped, as well as from some abolitionists and allies of the Underground Railroad. First person accounts. Harriet Tubman helped escape slave. Several people from Harriet Tubman helped escape, gave testimonies under her courage and resourcefulness. William Still's recordings, which William Still was a prominent abolitionist and on the Underground Railroad, kept detailed records of the people he helped. Tubman worked close with Still. There's a book called The Underground Railroad, published in 1872, refers to Tubman multiple times, providing confirmation of her role. The Combahee Raid, Tubman's collaboration with the Union, which is now in 1963. So this is after that. And then Sarah Bradford's diary, in the life of Harriet Tubman, also more letters from abolitionists. So we have plenty of evidence and historical records showing that Harriet Tubman was a person who existed, whose name originally wasn't Harriet Tubman, who also freed slaves, but also, yes, worked with the Union Army. And there's the actual history of it as far as the information we have and not the conjecture. That's it.
Okay, we're going to Chola, then we're going to Saru, and then Babu. and then I'm gonna go after Balboa.
Y'all on Harriet Tubman now? I caught the end of what he was saying.
Yeah, you could respond to anything, whether my out of Africa statement that I
It was
made,
something that I
slave
wanted to talk about.
trade, or Harriet Tubman. You could pick whatever you
Oh,
want.
okay. The outer Africa thing, like what you said was could be pseudo as well. Like we hominids are a species that we have similarities to. That don't mean we descend from hominids. Like a lot of people think we descend from Lucy. Lucy was I want to pronounce it right, Australopithecus. There's no proof that we descend from her or descend from any of those bones that you were talking about 7 million years ago. We don't we Homo erectus is its own species and it has its own timeline. That's all I'm gonna say about that part, right? It's complete pseudo to say that we descend from them because that's not a proven fact. Now there is a theory out there like that. We all know Darwin's theory, so a lot of people would disagree with Darwin's theory, but then they will preach it in other ways when it comes to talking about like mitochondrial DNA or the outer Africa theory. Then they'll start going back to those theories, not knowing that they're agreeing with Darwin's theory. But because hominids, that don't mean Homo erectus, but we're all some of the same subspecies group, which is like primates. Primates is another category that we fit in, but great apes are inside of primates. There's other primates out there. We're not the only primates. Um, damn. Okay, when it comes to transatlantic slavery, I think the brother keeps going back to there was one boat that he could name in the 1600s, and I don't think me personally on this panel have not said that there was no boats in the 1600s. What I said was there's 72 boats that they know of. 72, not just the one you talking about, but 72 boats that they're that I know for a fact they have records of, right? And this is from 1600 to the end of slave ships moving in the 1800s, 18 I think 30. So 1808 I think it was when they stopped the slave ships. I think and I might be wrong about this. Europe stopped it a couple of years before America did. So their slave ship stopped. It became illegal, but it was already a problem before it became illegal. If you go back in history, you'll see that a lot of countries had already stopped doing it. It became enacted as a law in 1808 in the United States to stop the slave ships in general. So it didn't mean that that's when it complete when it was slowing down. It had already slowed down before that. What I was saying is anything after 1808, after that, they were doing it illegally. That's a fact because we know the law was created in 1808. That's not even questionable. Anytime you bring up a boat that came after 1808, it's illegal. The law was enacted. But so with the Harriet Tubman thing, the Harriet Tubman saying that Harriet Tubman freed the slaves in the way that they preach it to us will cause cognitive dissonance amongst a lot of people because it's not really true in that sense. There is proof that there was a person with this author name. It's like what's the name that authors take on? This is a fake name. She took on a fake name, a fake character. So Harriet Tubman is not a real person. There was a real person behind it, could have been. But this person that they tell these stories about, this person was multiple different people. The Underground Railroad was comprised of multiple different people, and their whole goal was to get people to work for the Northern troops and fight for the Northern troops when the South and the North start getting into it. You got to remember that our people, like it, and it was our people were already writing the Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln only signed it. The Emancipation Proclamation had been written over 25 years before he signed it. It had been proposed to him in three different ways. Well, proposed to three different presidents in three different ways. So, and they kept telling people they need to change this and change that and change this and change that. Abraham Lincoln didn't do it because he wanted slaves to be free. Abraham Lincoln signed it because it was beneficial to America financially at the time period to sign it. Also, they needed the slaves in order to beat the South uh, in war. So, I mean, and there's other. That's why I say that book right there. It got so much shit in that book. Talks about how even slave traders, people who owned slaves at that time, got reparations before Lincoln died. Lincoln gave it to them. There's all sorts of shit going on at that time period that will cause a lot of cognitive dissonance because we've been taught that Lincoln freed the slaves. We've been taught that Harriet Tubman was freeing slaves, and she was in a way. If this person was indeed the woman that he's claiming that she was freeing slaves, but she was doing it for the Northern troops. She was doing it to get them to fight for the Northern troops. And that was it. And it was a conglomerate of people doing it. It wasn't just her. And I don't even want to talk about how much evidence there is of that. There's so much evidence of other people, including majority of them were white, getting people through the Underground Railroad. It was not just a Harriet Tubman story. It was a story of a group of people, multiple different people that were involved in helping slaves escape to the North and using the men then to fight in the war. So I don't, that, and that's all factual. They have physical, tangible proof on that it was multiple different people, not just one person named Harriet Tubman, um, conspiring to get slaves out. So like, the story itself is just embellished. I wouldn't say it's fake, it's embellished. Just like the slave trade ship thing. I think you guys keep thinking that people are saying it's fake. I don't know if that was a claim before, but it's embellished. All of these things are embellished. Even I don't even want to go into Rosa Parks. That story is embellished too. There's a lot of embellishment on that. I can tell you about some embellishment on Malcolm X, Alex Haley, Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy, the SCLC, the SNCC. We can talk. It's a lot of stuff that they embellished on in our history, but I don't know about if it's being pseudo or not, but it's embellished for sure.
Okay, so here's what's pseudo
Wait,
about
hold
that.
on, Fusion. Hold on, Fusion, because we do have a couple of people. We have Osaru, we have Balboa. You could go before me, and then Purple.
Okay.
So Osaru, then Balboa.
Okay, peace to the gods. There's so much to address, so I'll try to keep it short, and I'll start by clumping some things together that you addressed earlier. Science versus pseudoscience, and you said scientific theory also with theory. I can classify these two things together as a parallel. One, because they are bound by application for their validity and for their identification. The scientific aspect is something that is observed because it's already present in nature. And perhaps we make tools to observe things that we physically cannot, like X-rays or microwaves and things like that. We can still observe them. So there's a practical application based on observation and testing. This is why we've gone so far as to general relativity, special relativity. When it comes to quantum mechanics, there is something that doesn't match with quantum mechanics or general relativity. They don't match, they don't make sense. Now, what makes sense of it all is theoretical. It's called string theory. And the reason for a theory is an explanation based on what is observed. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going on. It just means that this is an explanation based on our observations. We could be missing a very crucial part. So when it comes to theory, theoretical things, they are pseudo. Just as Troller has said, they are pseudo, because think about it. The fundamental things that Galileo put into place, or any of the old classical science topics or people, we look at some of those things now and we have a more refined knowledge, and we would look at some of those things as pseudo, that they are the face of knowledge and not in depth. So they are theoretical to a degree. So all of this shit that we talking about tonight literally is all theoretical, one, because none of you were there. The fact that there is empirical information left behind, one, could be misinterpreted by the person that left that information, and also furthermore, henceforth and standing, be misinterpreted by the reader. So there is a whole lot of holes all over where no one can make an absolute absolute statement based on their facts, based on their observations. It's all frivolous, and it is meant to argue. And I do want to close with this. I heard Troller, I heard you say that the DNA in the mitochondria is the way that Darwin, Charles Darwin didn't know anything about DNA, mitochondrial DNA, RNA. They didn't know anything about what they would call, the first names would be organelles. They knew nothing about DNA. This was based on the limitations of their classifications, like I explained. Later on, as we've progressed scientifically, we've developed tools that has somewhat extended our means of observation. And this is why we rely on the applicable aspects. And observation is an application. You're observing it. And this is the thing, and I'm going to end with this. When it comes to the theoretical aspect, the reason why I made the parallel, and I'll throw another one in there, astronomy, astrology. Astronomy is what we know when we apply based on the limitations of our observations. And it could be that astrology is a layman's term based on the actual scientific observations based on our limitations. Because the farmer or the poor man or the layman who is not as involved in the science made up a story when to plant their corn, when they should go and pick the plums, when they should migrate because it's going to get cold up here. And if you look at history, a lot of these stories that are based on the celestial positions are stories that have to do with our seasonal change, sidereal aspects and events. And clearly, all of the architect that we can observe is celestial. It deals with the sun, the moon, the stars. So clearly we had observations that we created a science off of, which further was developed folklore, stories to explain the actual science, because we don't know what the fuck string theory is and we ain't going to try to learn. So here's the story. You make up a pun or you make up a story and you idolize this hero. So there's in the Africa thing, out of Africa, pure bullshit. We have no idea. The only thing that we can argue about, and it will always be an argument because they're just facts. Nothing points to the truth because you need a time machine to do that. Who's to say that we all migrated because there was a pole shift or there was post-glacial rebound happening? You know, so we had to move up from the original place we were to go somewhere dry, like Africa. So just because you find some motherfucking bones there in a place, don't mean that that's where those people came from, or they were originally there, or the Garden of Eden is there. That's all this shit is bullshit. It's all pseudo science. And the reason why it's pseudo is because it's limited to our observations. And none of this shit is absolute, even if it's empirical. The observation and the writing down of that history could be misinterpreted, along with the reader reading the misinterpreted shit and misinterpreting it even more. So I think we should be careful. This is nothing to argue about, but fuck the pseudo aspect until it has application. Hallelujah.
Is it on me?
Hallelujah.
Yeah,
Is
it's on you, Balboa. It's on Balboa, Fusion, Purple, and then me.
So I definitely was gonna speak to. I feel like part of the argument that happens has to do with, like Osaru was saying, right? There's holes, right? Part of those holes is the fact that the victor has been telling the story, the way that Troller mentioned before he left, right? The victor is who decided what the school curriculums were, how much we're gonna learn about this trajectory, which they are definitely a villain in, right? Of how many people have been affected, of different tribes, cultures, races, right? And they haven't, and they continue even to this day, try to change the narrative and even ban books and that kind of thing in order to drive an idea about who they are as a people, right? So that's part of the holes that exist. So I definitely agree how that can happen intentionally or not, or just by absence of information, right? And at the same time, I don't think that just because the school system only told us about Harriet Tubman, that anybody in this age and time has the intention of making us believe that somehow she was like Santa Claus and able to chariot all over the goddamn creator and grab all the slaves up and bring them to. No, nobody's saying that. Nobody ever said, at least in this time, that she did it by herself. The story is that there were networks of people in different places that were making this exodus out of slavery, right? Um, I got to know some of the history working in central New York, 4 hours away from New York City, where she actually came to live eventually in Auburn, New York. I was in New Hartford, right? And I stood in places. I did an underground railroad tour when I was there. And while it may not be perfect information, it may not tell all the stories, it tells a good amount of stories, right? Part of it is because in central New York, they had newspapers at the time, and they also had the highest level of slaves or quote unquote free men at that time who were black that could read. I think the literacy rate was something like 96%. The reason being is that people had migrated there from Massachusetts, and those people that originally were in Massachusetts believe that no matter who you were, that you should come to know the Bible. And you couldn't really know the Bible for yourself unless you could read it. And so, unlike other areas of the country, which at the time was only however many states, right? Those people in that area of central New York made the decision, let those people read, whoever they are, right? And so those people recorded history. And I even learned about the ways in which they recorded history. Some of it was like claims, or they have creative ways of telling some of the stories, because you can't just tell it like fuck these white people, right? So you had to be crafty. But the point that I'm making is, yes, there are anomalies to the information because of the history, but that's the closest we're coming to knowing that, for instance, Harriet Tubman definitely existed. Her original name was Anamatra Ross. However, it's told that she took on her mother's name, which was Harriet, and became Harriet Tubman, right? Nonetheless, I think that people take lack of information about some of that I explained as, oh, you see, it's not really like this, and it's not like, and therefore she doesn't exist. It's a complete falsehood. That's pseudo, right? Lack of full information is, I don't think that's the pseudo that we're talking about. We're not talking about like, okay, well, I only have 15 sets of facts. There's some other parts of story missing here. And some of it is an embellishment or trying to draw a conclusion, but it's like it's close to a certain margin of error. Versus having a conversation with someone that's about like false etymology, just making up some shit that don't even make no goddamn sense because it sound good to them, but has no basis in what any lexicon has ever asserted, right? They just want to say this word means this thing today. That's really more where we're leaning towards, as far as like the pseudo aspect of what people just make up as they go along. I land my plane. Oh, actually, I don't land my plane. Really quick, I'm working on a project right now The reason why I find this to be really important is because, for instance, in my neighborhood, they are attempting to erase, right? Even though they say that they're not erasing it, right? But it's Dominicans, full transparency, that are want to claim that they want to take over this part of the neighborhood and call it a Dominican historic district. Meanwhile, this is where W.E.B. Du Bois lived. This is where Ralph Ellison lived, where the Greens of the Green Book for Negro Travelers started that manual. This is where George Washington lived, and Alexander Hamilton, and so much more Black history. Artists and musicians, some who helped presidents get elected, right? And so you don't just get to come and say, we're taking over this area and making it all about us, right? And so getting it right and not, I feel like our own people, by saying Harriet Tubman didn't exist, you're helping to erase narratives that actually hold weight. Because, for instance, in the situation of what I'm fighting, there's actually money attached to it. There's money attached to it, right? So based on them establishing this historic district in the name of their culture, right? There are tax incentives, there are historic landmark funding monies that will be given out and all this kind of thing, right? And shouldn't that money be going to the people who know the legacy of all the tremendous history that is American history that existed there, and not some fucking newcomers that just got here in 1970 and think they built some shit when really you're just moving into the shell of what already existed that was created by some other people so you can fucking come here. So this is all very important. Now I land my plane.
Okay, so was it on me or I'm losing the track
Thank
of the
you.
hands? Okay.
No, you're good. You're good. It's on you. Thank you.
Okay, so just to wrap that up on on the Harriet Tubman thing and on the Slave Trade Act thing, I think we have it somewhat situated, but it is things like the statements that the Underground Railroad was only, because I think that's what was just made, that the Underground Railroad was only made to get slaves to come and fight for the Union Army. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, that was roughly or exactly what was stated. Okay. On top of the Harriet didn't free the slave. Now, there's a point in the portraying Harriet, the Santa Claus portrayment or the embellishment, of saying that Harriet Tubman frees the slaves, basically, is very general and maybe misleading. But that's not generally how it's portrayed, or how it's, if you've gone into any in-depth studies at all, even basic actually studies on the Underground Railroad itself, Harriet Tubman comes up in it amongst a bunch of other conductors and a bunch of different pathways throughout the United States, from the South all the way up to Canada. So I'm not actually sure how people even got the superhero version of Harriet Tubman, other than the movies and cartoons and stuff that people make. Um, so the dates. So dates are important. So in the information we do have, because we know that from all records we have, including publications in 1931, including for y'all know who John Brown is, a white abolitionist that killed a lot of white people, from the Quakers in the late 1780s is where the Underground Railroad started to developed, and by the 1820s, 1830s, it was organized into the Underground Railroad that we know. The Union Army started. The Union Army was formed in 1861, making it impossible for the Underground Railroad, which was forming from 1780 up. It makes it impossible for the Underground Railroad to be a mechanism for white people to get black people to join the Union Army, because it didn't exist. So that's it. I know we spent a lot of time on that, so I'm gonna try to keep that short. I just want to make that point. So I'm glad kind of
Yeah,
move on
no,
my other
no
point.
problem. No problem. It's going to purple, me, and then elder, and then maybe we could get into carbon versus melanin right after that. Because I do want to have that conversation tonight.
So I was gonna address something Chola said, but he's gone. But Balboa and Fusion both touched upon it. I mean, I don't know where we're getting this hero worship thing with Harriet, because I was always taught, it was the Quakers and the Shakers who were involved as well. And I feel like um maybe, I don't know, but I'll just float this out here. Maybe they decided that she was the proper face of the movement, just like, there's talk about Martin Luther King was the best face for the movement, and Rosa Parks. I know the story about the 15-year-old girl, and maybe it was a conscious decision to make Rosa Parks the face of the movement. I don't know, but I don't know where people are getting that it was Harriet Tubman running all around hither and thither, um, you know, down in Atlanta and up to New York. You know what I mean? So that's all I wanted to say.
Just in real quick, to that. So some stuff with Harriet Tubman, why they while some things may be embellished, is because she actually did certain things that were above average. Um, like, so she didn't free 1,000 slaves, but freeing 70 slaves, which is about the count, is is actually quite a few. Like going back and forth, and the so even when I was taught about Harriet Tubman, it wasn't the embellishment, the Santa Claus part of it. It was more so the think of a person who's already escaped slavery, basically. Like once at the so this is you have to you're generally in the time frame to where from the north to the south. Once you get to the north, people that go get to the north from the south never come back to the south. So that was a thing, is to get to the north and stay north forever and raise your generations there. So it was the very fact that anybody, Harriet Tubman and all the rest of the conductors, the very fact that they actually went back into the South when they were already North, because they weren't free on paper. And even in the North, some areas could still basically deport you back to the South. So even in the North, it wasn't completely safe. That's why the Underground Railroad had to go all the way up to Canada, which I followed from the bottom of Missouri up to Canada. So the North and the South were two completely different places. Once you cross that Mason-Dixie line, you don't look back. That's like the rule. And the fact that they did look back and also went back over that line and deep into that line to get more people was it doesn't have to be superhero shit. Like that's commendable and recognizable and remarkable in itself, especially in the time frame if you actually know what that time was like and how dangerous it was to cross back over that line and to actually bring more people with you that haven't even been north, because the people that you bringing don't know anything about the path that you just traveled, even though you may be an expert at it, or actually you're still learning the path to a degree. But those people don't know that. So not only are you endangering yourself, you're endangering yourself more by bringing people that know nothing about the journey and things like that. And then you also have to have methods to resettle those people in the north, and all is a whole big thing to it where it's offensive to even minimize it in the way that it's being minimized and say that, well, Harriet Tubman didn't exist and the Underground Railroad wasn't a real thing. And the only reason it exists was because the white man wanted to flood the Union Army. These are ridiculous statements. So I'm just addressing that particular point that you mentioned for specificity.
I don't
Thank
know.
you, Reb. No, that was actually perfect. Really quick, it was actually on me, and I love you, my brother Osiris, but I gotta push back on the out of Africa theory. I understand, and that's why I kind of I spoke about the definitions between layman's terms of theories and scientific theory, because scientific theory comes with evidence and facts and things that you can attribute and look to, right? And even with the idea that, oh, we're finding these bones, how do you know that these bones weren't coming from somewhere else? Well, we know that because you only find certain bones in certain places. You don't find 7 million-year-old bones in South America or in North America, or damn, you don't even really find them in Asia, right? You don't find these things, those places. You only find them in Africa. And the part of it being a hominin species is because, you know, it's the things that we share, right? So when Chola was saying that, oh, a hominin species doesn't have anything to do with human Homo sapiens or anything like that, well, the entire group is called hominin species, right? So that includes Australopithecus, that includes genus Homo, that includes a Homo erectus, that includes Neanderthals, all of these things, that includes all of these things, where in all reality doesn't come about for millions of years afterwards. Like the oldest one that we have, uh, that even comes outside of Africa is only but 1.8 million years old, where the oldest that we have that's inside of Africa is 7 million years old. So even if, you know, we don't have a time machine and we can't go back and watch this thing happen, we can at least go by how old they are, the dates. Like we can at least go by that. And as long as we're not finding stuff older in other places, it's safe to say that the oldest come from the place that we're saying. It's just safe to say that, right? So it's not so much of, you know, trying to attribute everybody into being African, right? It's more so just following the clues to figure out where the origins are, and the origins just lead us there, you know. And
I agree.
yeah, so that's all I wanted to say about that.
I
Oh,
agree, and but I disagree with one point because if you think chronologically, what has been dug up in such short time, as opposed to the vast you mentioned millions of years, there's a lot that is going to be lost. And the fact that in this short time we have carbon dating and different ways that archaeologists are able to place time on something, could it be that, like I said, these are the limitations of our observation, that there's just something else that we haven't dug up yet that could be 2 million years old? It could be a banana with legs because we share some DNA with bananas. It could have been when bananas dropped off their legs and they stayed at the poles because the polar energy from the sun was warm enough because of the energetic particles heated it from those areas, because post glacial rebound you can't live equatorially because it's all water. So there's so many factors that perhaps, you know, for the people to make the claim out of Africa, like you say, you know, the geological aspect isn't something that we can lock onto, because if you go to those places, Clovis, all of these different, you know, bones that have been dug up, a lot of those bones aren't familiar as far as the mitochondrial DNA. It doesn't matter. So I could furthermore state or use as a case that that we are migratorial because of the conditions of the planet were much more violent, much more active. There's polar core samples that shows that the magnetic field was actually the opposite way. So there's been a lot of changes. You know, a lot of things we could be 4 million years old, and the shit that we was doing is covered under a mile of dirt. So like it may not be dug up yet, and I'm sure we have yet to find out more shit to dig up for us to even make a solid claim on any of those things. So yeah, I do agree with you, and it still stands that it's theoretical. It's still theoretical.
Mic check.
Right, but
I guess
has
somebody
enough
Okay,
else.
I
of the
could
theory been
I
proven
could
or been substantiated?
Fusion, you have something going on with your mic.
Mic check.
Oh, I'm sorry, Elder. It is
Okay.
on you, Elder, and then it's supposed to go to Elder Balboa, and then we're gonna go to you, Fusion.
Okay. Peace, blessings, and supreme light to the panel. Man, I'm loving this. But I can't help but to touch back or before I go further, but I gotta touch on the Harriet Tubman thing, right? Listen, can't speak for nobody else but me. Harriet Tubman is a motherfucking superhero goddess in history for me. Okay, now we embellish on all the aspects of what this wasn't. I'm from Pennsylvania. I was born and raised in Philly. So when it's somebody, I'm gonna get into who spoke on the Quakers. Okay, this is the beginning of me seeing righteous white people that went against their own for whatever, for the sake of righteousness in their heart or just divine or whatever, but they always have existed. And the thing about people don't know about the history of Philadelphia. Okay, history of Philadelphia is the first capital of this country. Everything was there. Everything that they got in Washington. Okay, but the Quakers, because they were so powerful at the time. Okay, the darkness came in and we gotta get this shit out of here, out of Philly, and they got that shit to Washington because of the doctrine of the Quakers and that shit they wouldn't allow, and how their theology was and all that. The penitentiary comes from the Quakers because they threw you in a cell and they gave you a Bible and was repentance. Penitence, their penitentiary penitence was something about, saving the soul, but that's a whole nother story. But I'm getting back to Harriet Tubman. Okay, it may not been what it is, but that's a black woman, that's a goddess in my eyesight. They ain't put no male in there that did what she did, or whether it's a fairy tale or whatever. I'm just applauding that, and that's what I wrote on throughout history as far as like top queens, that just represented revolution. Okay, now getting to the scientific and aspect, listen, I have no education on the scientific stuff, but you get into the different what you say, Paleolithic and different ages of humanity, where they say hominoids or humanoids there, or something like that. But anyway, it's the evolution of the times, and you if you pay attention, man, listen, you can't take me back to what we was, because I am that I am today, which is a hybrid, a mutant of all that was before. And then I'm a new creation for today's time. And guess what? The energy of divinity is going to exude for now. I ain't got time to be going back and arguing about this was this and that from the biblical days, whatever, the world wars and all that shit. That shit, I mean, like, it's good, nice little information to discuss in a certain thing, but the debate and that makes me who I am, and I gotta go back to that right now instead of creating now for the divinity within me, or the mutant that I am, the hybrid, the humanoid for today's time and modern times. That's just the energy that I'm vibrating on. But like, I'd like to hear about this energy, and I can speak on a lot of different aspects of it, but it has no more power for me. You know what I'm saying? It's just to show that I have some little information, I have a little knowledge and whatever. But that's it. I'm gonna lay my plane on that. Peace, blessed, supreme light. Thank you for letting me share.
Mic check. I appreciate you, brother. It's on you, Balboa, and then we go into Fusion.
So I want to just piggyback real quick on the last part of what Elder said, as far as like Instead of dealing with your now, you gotta recreate history. And it seems like there is a movement to undo our leaders, right? And now I'm never against understanding the full truth. That's fantastic, right? But it seems like there's a lot of effort being put towards undoing the value of the leaders, specifically tied to the movements that have been about fighting for our freedom. And I don't see the same energy around undoing the legacy of the white men who oppressed and held slaves and subjugated and disrespected and violated the same people. Why would we start with our leaders? Is weird to me. That's just my thought, right? And I'm not, you know what I mean? Sometimes I think Kamala Harris said something to this effect today, like what we could do it all at the same time. But let's just please keep that energy for those legacies of those other people that definitely was involved in harm and not the good. But while y'all focusing on tearing black leaders down, how about you work on that too? I think it's weird, and it kind of makes it feel agenda driven when you look at it from that perspective, right? That being said, another experience that I had on this app was somebody telling me about flat Earth and their assertion that it's definitely a flat Earth, right? Because somebody cammed up in, I think it was Australia, right? And simultaneously cammed up somewhere in the Midwest in the United States. And they were saying that's the proof that the earth was flat, because this claim that the sun hits certain parts of earth and that there's time zones and the sun rises and sets here and it's a different time in another place. They were saying it was light in both parts. And I just quickly pulled up the listing of the time zones and when the sun sets and rises in both places, and was able to show overlap of daylight in both places, where it would definitely be plausible that there could have still been sun in both places, because it's sunset over there, but it's just morning over here, right? And that's the way that people are approaching a lot of other information too. They don't have a background to understand what is the method of evaluating these things, right? And so they're, oh my God, you see, it's just not even possible. Because look what I'm telling you. Look, I'm showing you that. Da, 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 da. But if you knew when sunrise and sunset was in both places and how the sun crossing or really the earth spinning, right, worked, you wouldn't be coming to that conclusion, right? And it's working that same way with these other pieces of information. Something that I believe Fusion said reminded me, like, another method of knowing some of the historical stuff is the law. There were actually court cases fought for some of these things that are recorded and establishes a timeline. And not only a timeline, but the status of people at the different points in time, or even that there was a fight over their status. Is this person free? Is this person a slave? Are we going to free them even though the person wants them to continue to be a slave? All those things were fights that were being fought at the time. And there's a project being worked on right now where they're going back to slave cases that are still being cited in current law, because there's so much of it that is still a part of the law that's enforced today, right? And so that's also a part of the history that people will want to say doesn't exist, right? But if you don't know those methods, if you don't know, like, okay, how do I approach verifying that these incidents were real or true? Oh, okay, I could look at the law. I could look at insurance policies. I could look at cargo manifests. If you don't know that, then it all sounds really incredible and impossible. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to put that on the table. I land my plane.
Black Earth real.
Oh, it
I'm
was
just playing.
supposed to be on Fusion. Is he still in the room?
Nah,
Did he get a phone call or something?
he left. I'm saying peace and blessings. I thank y'all for your time. I enjoyed the moment. Have a wonderful evening on purpose, with purpose, in purpose. Mic check. I am hip hop. There it is.
Peace to you.
Peace to you, brother.
Is
Thank
it
you for the
on me
mic
or
check.
raise my hand?
Appreciate you.
My check.
Oh my God. Go ahead, brother. Nobody else had their hand raised, right? No, Asaru, did you raise your hand? I
Yeah,
think I saw
but
your hand raised.
I wrote it in the
Capone
comments because I didn't have a hand to raise.
Capone told me not to do it, so I'm not gonna do it.
Got you, got you. If nobody else troll it, it's on you.
So I really want to explain cognitive dissonance for a minute. When you guys hear information that's true and you decide you don't want to take it just based on the fact that it's always been taught to you, and you believe it in your heart because it makes you feel good, that's just cognitive dissonance, right? In a sense, in a nutshell, right? You're not accepting truth, even though it's given to you in a format where you can see that it's real. So when it comes to the Harriet Tubman thing, I understand why a lot of people are not going to accept that no matter what, because it seems like like you said, your heroes are being knocked down. But the reality of it is you let your enemies tell you who your heroes is in the first place. So you're not actually attacking your heroes. You are attacking your enemy for giving you false information about who your heroes are. And that's a big difference. When you let your enemy tell you, hey, this is your hero. You go to school, pick up a book inside of the education program. Nat Turner's not in there, but these people are. And then you know what I mean. There's Martin Luther King. There ain't no, there's no SNCC, just a lot of SCLC. You know what I mean? And I implore you guys to know what SNCC is because that was another group that was around for the SCLC, which is Martin Luther King group. And Kwame Ture. Uh, these are names that people should know. These are people who actually made movements and made headway for us. We only know who did political movements because behind those political movements were white people who put them in place in order for them to be our heroes so that we can then get involved in like these elections, voting, all of that shit, the SCLC, they are the reason why most black people are Democrats right now, because the deal that they had with Kennedy is just a fact. Martin Luther King made a deal with Kennedy. Well, he made a deal with Bobby Kennedy, and Bobby Kennedy got it to John F. Kennedy. They were supposed to sign the Civil Rights Act, but, John F. Kennedy got killed, so Lyndon B. Johnson ended up signing it. A lot of the shit was political, and that's kind of hard for people to understand, you know what I mean? Because we've been taught that these are our heroes, but we got to remember who taught us about these heroes. This is not to take them down. This is to build us up because the moment that we understand the full truth of it, then we can get a good understanding of what we need to do today to get us to the next step. If we just take the truth that they gave us, then we're going down the path that they guided us, and most likely that's not a good path. So if you trust these people, then continue down the path that you're on. Do not wake up. You only take the other pill. What is it? The blue pill. And if you just want to wake up and come up out of that matrix, I'll be here with the blue pill. I'm done.
We're gonna go to Fusion because he dropped before his time. We're gonna go to Osaru. And if anybody else want to speak, please raise your hand. We are free after Osaru.
All right. Yeah. Had some technical difficulties. So, I actually missed the part that I actually missed the last few minutes. So I can let Asaru go. I mean, I heard the last part that I just came in on, which I do agree with as far as some parts of history and things like that, as far as who we got it from or the reasoning behind it or things like collaborations with the general system, Martin Luther King, Kennedy, John Wesley Dobbs. Um, one of the reasons there's
Yep.
so many police officers and black police officers in a certain part of Atlanta in Fulton County is John Wesley Dobbs, but that was due to a deal with a political party that um, basically promised a certain amount of votes in relation to that thing. So that those things exist. But when it comes to history and there's a large leap to this person doesn't exist or this is multiple people, like if we were talking about still the Harriet Tubman thing, then we have we know when the Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, which should be significant to us as far as our heroes and things like that. There's no reason that she can't fit in there with them because we have records from personal accounts to stories and meetings with abolitionists, all the way up to the time that she, yes, did do the Union Army thing, which is not the part that's disagreed on. And my understanding, which I could do further research on, is that one of the reasons why the Union Army thing is mentioned with Harriet Tubman is because, like, what seems to be a trend when women lead military excursions, there were fewer deaths on the very few actually on the Union side for that particular excursion and how well it was done and all that good stuff. But also, the Union Army didn't start until 1861. The Underground Railroad started forming in the 1780s, 1790s. Quakers were still around. So, and Harriet Tubman's first um, excursion through the or first escaped slavery probably in 1850s or something like that. So that's before the all of that is before the Union Army even existed. So the Underground Railroad couldn't have been a plot for the um, Union Army to get black folks into to joining the Union Army because the timeline don't match because it didn't even exist at the time when Harriet Tubman and John Brown and other abolitionists were writing about the Underground Railroad. Now, it is inaccurate to just look at Harriet Tubman as Santa Claus. Like, if you make the statement, which again, I don't know where people who would have taught this like this, but if someone taught it as in Harriet Tubman freed the slaves and kind of left it at that as if Harriet Tubman freed all the slaves and there was 1 million slaves in America in 1860 and Harriet Tubman freed all 1 million of them, that would be highly inaccurate and a very pseudo historical way to look at things. But I never received that information or received it in that context. It's generally received in the Underground Railroad as a network of passages with a network of conductors and networks of abolitionists. And these are the abolitionists and these are the pathways and things like that. And Harriet Tubman sticks out of that for specific reasons, you know. So I'll leave that at that.
Yeah, that's the question. What specific reason?
The specific reasons, like I just named, her involvement with the Union Army and the outcome of that excursion and how well it was done. That's one of the things she gets credit for. It doesn't mean she's Santa Claus or Superman. It's just something that she gets credit for. The traveling back and forth for abolitionists was so for an abolitionist, if you're um, on the Underground Railroad, it's not as dangerous for you because you're a white person. You can travel back and forth across the state lines all you want. But for um, an uh, previously enslaved person, especially who's escaped slavery, the rule is generally you stay north. You don't come back south for really any reason. That's generally means your death. There's people
Well, yeah,
looking.
you
There's a
got
whole
factory jobs.
yeah. Yeah, I
Originally,
mean, you got
before the war started, there were factory jobs. So, I mean,
But
they
even
weren't
before
the
the
Northern
Masters,
troops
we're talking
because
about 17,
the war
1800.
hadn't started. Yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We can't push the timeline up to the 1860s. We have to take the timeline of the Underground Railroad back to 1800, 1790
Well, they didn't
area.
give it the name Underground Railroad was given a specific name for a time period of Harriet Tubman. It wasn't any. They definitely had slave routes where people were escaping underneath the same escape routes that supposedly Harriet Tubman went through. And this according to the story that we have, the mythological story of Harriet Tubman freeing people and going back and forth and freeing people
Right, but you're
several
calling that
times.
a
You know,
mythological
which
story. So let's go right to that. The mythological story
yeah, man,
of Harriet Tubman freeing. Now,
yeah,
if we say she freed 1 million people, then yes, that would be a mythological story, or that'll definitely be an embellished story. But if we say she freed 70 slaves,
there's no
we
proof
should
that
look
she
at
led a
that as
rebellion of
a
Northern troops either. I don't know where you got that from either. She was a recruiter, army
but
leader. Women being army leaders at that time was not. It was not even. That never was a thing.
yes, there's actually evidence on that, and that's the
I
involvement.
want to
That's
see
part of
this
the
evidence.
involvement, and that's why
I
that's
like to see that evidence though, Future. About one of her being of any woman being a leader of a military for the Northern troops at all. You know, not on a attack on a small rebellion of escaped slaves and fighting back, but actual military leader. She has a pension that you can look up. She's labeled as a recruiter. So that's what she was labeled as. This person was labeled as a recruiter. There could have been 100 different Harriet Tubmans for all we know. Every person that led somebody back could have been considered a Harriet Tubman. They were actually taking, they were taking not recordings, but they were taking records of how many people were being brought back before this. And mind you, slaves have been escaping to the north since the 1700s, but the difference is they were going in the 1800s for jobs. Once those jobs became available in the north, they were going north to get those jobs in particularly. And the factories were sending people down there to help them. So, like I was saying before, the Underground Railroad was not just comprised of this Harriet Tubman character. It is not to say that there was never a Harriet Tubman, one person in particular, but to say that this one woman freed all of these slaves in the fairy tale sense that they tell it in the movies, that whole story is made up. There's nobody that you can physically fit to that description or time period that has anything, of historical data to one person that will link to that. And I would love to see any proof of that. I would love to see that because I definitely went checked into this 1,000 times. I've never seen anything about that. I do believe that there was a Harriet Tubman. I don't believe that she was the person that folklore made her. I think that white people created this mythological creature to say that northern white people were better than southern white people. And that was the whole point of that story. And every story that comes from that's the main objective when they're telling that story because there's so many other stories that didn't get told. There's so many books written by actual slaves that they don't even talk about, And then I do agree with CRT, which is a democratic-based thought process that we do need to change the way that we tell history in America because it's not being told correctly. And we already know history is told by the victors, but we have ancestors. I mean, not even ancestors. I hate to say the word ancestors because we got great grandparents that lived through these situations that have stories to pass down. And a lot of them know that some of these stories that they're preaching about some of these people are not exact in truth and how they happen. And then by the time we find out, we have to have some level of resistance mentally to it because we've been groomed to believe that the northern whites are better than the southern whites because they didn't want to hold on to slavery. It's kind of like now how black people vote Democrat, even though the Democrats is the KKK. They were the KKK for generations. And nobody knows how we ended up being a part of a KKK movement, but somehow we did.
Right. So all of that in relation to the
Hold on, rapid
Democrats and
fire is almost
everything
out.
after that is the so some of that is relevant, but doesn't equate to Harriet Tubman not existing or not having um, done what she done, or the Railroad not beginning in the late 1700s, and Harriet Tubman being freed as a slave herself before 1861, and the Union Army not starting until 1861. So her work with the Union Army is, which wasn't just a recruiter. She was also known as a spy and different things like that. So there's a lot of accounts of, and when I
Yeah, that's
say
a fact.
led the army, I don't mean she was appointed general or anything like that. I mean more so that there was documentations and the accounts of soldiers and things like that that went into Harriet Tubman's leading, and I say leading such as guiding and even in some tactical senses, the certain specific skirmishes in that war, basically. And as far as relating to the existence of Harriet Tubman as a person, the embellishment, we can let go of the embellishment, but we don't have to go all the way to zero with it, because Frederick Douglass wrote about Harriet Tubman. Sarah, what was her name? I'd have to look it up. But there's the woman that wrote the first autobiography about Harriet Tubman with personal accounts and everything. John Brown has um, many different letters and occurrences of Harriet Tubman, and in the records by the people who of conductors in the Underground Railroad. Let me look that up. What was the book? William Still. So there's the Underground Railroad, William Still, 1872, if you want the references. William Still,
No, I
1872
know about
was
William still.
right, but that book is called The Underground Railroad. Okay, and you have her own testimonies. You have Frederick Douglass's letters. You have eyewitness accounts and things that we can say that Harriet Tubman existed as a person, and what we can count from the records of the Underground Railroad conductors, such as John Brown and others, is that she freed roughly 70 slaves or more.
Fusion, are you
Okay.
saying that her name was in fact as well Harriet Tubman?
I'm referring to her as Harriet Tubman. Her original name would have been Meta Ross. Or actually, Balboa said the full name. Meta is for, I can never remember the full name for some reason.
Aramita.
Aramita. Okay. So referred to in her real name, if you knew her as a kid, would have been probably Mita Ross. So Aramita was her name, but that's a name that someone, so Tubman is, I believe, her married name after she was married, and Harriet being her mother's name. So, yes, Mita Ross is a real person, but just because Mita Ross changes her name to Harriet Tubman doesn't make Mita, if we have to say Mita Ross, and I'm fine with replacing the word Harriet Tubman with Mita Ross, if with Amarita Ross, if we want to, just so that there's no confusion about this being an actual person.
With that being said, thank you, Fusion. With that being said, thank you, Osaru, for being so patient. I kind of wanted them to hash it out with that little segment. I appreciate you, brother. I really do. It's on you. Take as long as you want. We here.
Hey, I'm not gonna do that to y'all, but I was enjoying it too because it made me think of, and I won't be too long because I do remember you saying something about carbon versus melanin. However, the I had somebody in front of my house the other day, and they wanted to see if we were voting, and he said, "You gonna vote for Kamala Harris, huh?" I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, you're not gonna vote for Kamala Harris." I said, "No, no." "Are you gonna vote for Trump?" I said, "I don't think so." And I'm noticing all of these commercials and notifications and pamphlets that say, "Get out and vote. Your vote is private, but you actually voting isn't. Your friends and family will know for a public listing. And it occurs to me that what Troll is talking about and what Fusion is talking about is the same goddamn thing. Here this man is in front of me telling me that my vote has value, more value than he could ever explain, as if he knows me. Furthermore, after I was done with this fellow, I let him know that you're just walking around gauging energy. You're gauging energy, and the energy that you're gauging is not beneficial for me in my neighborhood. So if I'm going to gauge any kind of energy based on empirical facts, based on what the enemy is trying to propagate and program in our minds so that whoever the point person is to be controlled is controlled, that through it all, you got motherfuckers going around door to door for Trump, for Kamala Harris, and it's all about your fucking energy. It's all about taking from you. But what do you take? What do you take from Harriet Tubman? Albeit if it's a conspiracy or not, because it very well could have been, and she very well could have existed. So what is the only valid fucking point that we can apply here? The actual psychological effect that Aramita or Harriet Tubman has on you right now today. She's dead. She did whatever the fuck she did, and she's dead. Whether she was fake, she's dead now. Whether she was real, she was dead. She's dead now. How the fuck am I going to go from door to door, extracting energy, gauging energy from people, when the electoral collegiate vote makes your public vote absolutely, positively nothing? So it is about the gauging of energy. You guys are talking about mental fucking warfare. That's exactly what this whole is. It ain't even a debate. It's a bill, because you're exposing a spectrum of what the fuck this really is. Ain't shit Harriet Tubman can do for you right now unless it's psychological. So you can either take from what Fusion is saying, analyze it the way Fusion is, and take the good from it. Or you can do what Troller is saying. You can look at the shit, analyze this shit, refute this shit, rebut this shit, research this shit. It's all beneficial because, one, it's adding to the gnosis or the formulation thereof. So this will never be a debate, because the gnosis refutes even debating about the subject, because the only thing that can be applied or understood or observed is the psychological effect that it has on the person hearing the story told. And the person writing the story, let's remember that they mean to have a psychological effect. So there is cognitive bias from the writer and the reader. And this being known, there's no argument. It is, what can you extract from these stories instead of one-upmanship? You know, this is what it's all about. Building on this shit. Okay, what can we take from Harriet Tubman, whether she was real or fake, that will help us now, where we can exponentially, if she's fake, we had the power to make this shit real. Otherwise, we just gonna keep fucking arguing about this shit. It's not an argument. It's not even a debate. Like, man knows not by what he's told, period. You can read some shit and know what the fuck you read, but do you know that what you read was authentic? Now we got AI. You can look at the motherfucking videos. You don't know what the fuck is real now. And they've been doing that for decades. So, you know, like, it's a play on your mind. Your mind is the energy source Because when they get ready to fuck you over with their policies, whether the Democrat wins or the Republican wins, they have to gauge your energy to see how effective you will be when they get ready to fuck you. So I'm appreciating the conversation, and I'll chime in last on the carbon and melanin thing if you're still doing that. I appreciate you.
No problem. Really quickly before you go, Spider, I was asking the comments to fact check um Harriet Tubman's leadership
Oh no, I
during
don't have
the
skip me.
okay. No problem. So Harriet Tubman's leadership during the Combahee River Raid is supported by several historical accounts and documentations. Here are key pieces of evidence. Um, Military records. Tubman served as a scout and a spy for the Union Army during the Civil War. Official military records indicate her involvement in the Combahee River Raid, which was commanded by Colonel James Montgomery in the Second South Carolina Infantry, who which who was of African descent. Uh, Tubman was tasked with leading the raid due to her extensive knowledge of the geography of South Carolina and her connections with local enslaved communities. Eyewitness accounts, soldiers who participated. I'm going to start skimming through. One soldier, Private John W. McGowan, wrote about Tubman's bravery and leadership during the raid, stating that she guided the troops and provided crucial information. Her own accounts, she describes her role in planning the operation and leading the troops in a successful attack, which liberated more than 700 enslaved people and destroyed the Confederate supplies. And her letters and later autobiographical accounts, including published by abolitionist friends, further details of her contributions. So that was just for the people in the comments, just letting you know about some of the accounts that have been written about her and her involvement in that war. I'm sorry we got so many people who came in, so I kind of missed who was supposed to be going next. So if anybody wanted to be speaking, just raise your hand and we can go straight to you.
Well, like I said, there's no military activity from her. He just proved it by saying that there was a recording of a skirmish that came out 1922. You know what year she died, is it? What year the Harriet Tubman died?
Wait, can you say that again? What did I say?
I said, what year did she die?
Hold on, give me 1 second. But you said something before that.
Yeah, it was okay. So a lot of information came out for Harriet Tubman 1922, right? 1922. I was asking you what year she died, so we can get a full synopsis of all of this time period. She died in the early
It's
1900s, right?
1913.
March 10th, 1913 is when she died.
1913. Now, this is the problem with information, right? Where the information came from is pertinent. But that's what I said before. Sorrow, I agree with everything you just said. I said that from the gate. When you, in order to check history or even fact check, like somebody said they were fact checking, you can't fact check by Googling something. You have to actually go into detail and check this shit out. Like if you care about the Harriet Tubman time period and the abolitionists and everything that follows with that, you have to go into detail and check this shit out. You can't just Google it and be like, that's what it was. Because what is your resource? Like, where did you get that information from? On top of that, like, I mean, you guys got to know the time period of where she lived because 1913, okay, so like the situation in Wilmington, North Carolina, that shit happened in 1890, around 1893, 1892, somewhere around there. The reason why I'm even bringing that up is because those people that did that, they have started what we now today consider the Republican Party. And this goes to Sorrow's point. A lot of this shit is being told by the victors, and what they're doing is they're establishing a democracy, they're establishing a republic, they're establishing a the Northern victory in United States of America as we know it today against what we consider the rebellion. And because that was getting established, a lot of stories came out of that. A lot of the stories came out of that situation, and they came out as heroine stories, war hero stories, and I think somebody said, why aren't we going against the bad guys and all of this stuff before? But they've been knocking down statues of Robert E. Lee. If you guys don't know who that was a general on the southern side. They've been knocking down statues like that. But then my whole point is this, right? The northern side is not as good as you guys think they were. The southern side was probably as bad as you thought they were. But the northern side definitely weren't who you think they were. They weren't out to help the slaves. Were there white people there to help the slaves with this conspired underground railroad? Could have been. It could have been. I'm not going to say I know for a fact that it was, though. What I do know for a fact is those people were definitely trying to get people to come work for their companies. They definitely were trying to get people to go fight for the northern troops. That's a fact. They definitely were using black blood in order to prosper. But I mean, I don't want to tear down y'all heroes because there's no way you can do that because the people who built those heroes are bigger than me. But
Right, but
I agree with us all though. There's
you're
certain things like flat
conflating.
Earth that's not objectable. I don't understand how somebody can
Right.
say flat Earth is real, and that shit is just
Okay.
ridiculous.
Got it.
Right,
But
but
you're
there's certain things
conflating
like the fact
issues.
that
Wait, hold on, real quick, Fusion, because
No offense,
what I
I
did
know smart
was a
relationships,
little.
but
Oh,
wasn't a
okay, you
politician.
finished. You finished. What you did
Okay.
was conflate issues, right? So, for one, to say that the things that I've said was written after her death, when I mentioned military records, that was written 1862 through 1865. That started off with military records, right? And the military records is what I was reading about when it comes down to the documentation of the Combahee River raid. This is coming from the post-war accounts, and she was still alive when these post-war accounts was happening. So that idea that all of this stuff that I said was something that happened after her death was straight flagrant, right? And as far as
He
and if you
said
want to
that
talk
though.
about her,
He said that though.
you
It's a
you did when you mentioned what year she was born, I mean what year she died, and that a lot of the things that was said about her
her
was written
biography was written
after her
after her
death.
death in
So when
1922.
we can only sing together, we can't talk together. So while you were saying your flagrant statements, I was on silent, so I expect the same. Thank you. So, when it comes down to what the military itself was saying about what this lady did, is it's irrefutable, right? Even you can go and look it up, whether if it was a 5 minute little rundown on ChatGPT or whether if you're reading a whole extensive book about it. I'm pretty sure you'll have more details than I gave, but what I gave was not false. It was written during the time that she was alive, and it came from the military records. So with that being said, I'm going to Fusion because he was after me, and then we could go to you, Trolla, when he's done.
okay, and just real quick, that was kind of my point also. Some things, just like the William Still book, which y'all seem to be familiar with, is also from 1872. The Sarah Bradford book on Harriet Tubman's life is from 1869. So this isn't just information that came out in the 1900s or 1920s after she was born. These are accounts of people who spoke to her when she was alive, including the letter from Frederick Douglass as well. So we have, as far as evidence goes, we have multiple points from multiple sources, including military, personal, and other abolitionists, including Frederick Douglass, to confirm this.
Uh, Trolla and the purple.
I ain't got nothing to say. I know that autobiography was written 1922. You guys talking about Field? That book didn't have no information. I have that book at the house.
Okay,
I
so
own that
you
book.
can look up the book, Scenes in the Life
Crazy.
of Harriet Tubman in
Yeah.
1869 by Sarah Bradford.
Harriet Tubman, The Road to Freedom.
Right,
I
so
don't
that's
have
a
that book
reference.
though. I don't have the Road to Freedom though.
Yeah, it's some of them, and everything isn't. Some of them, some books are more popular than other books and all that. The way the information comes in, we can agree on certain things actually, but with in-depth research or further research, there is that book from 1869. Again, there's Frederick Douglass's letters. There's also the um, abolitionists and or rather the conductors or the head conductors, even through the Underground Railroad, started keeping records of where everything was because these records that Underground Railroad conductors kept made life or death because on this chart is safe houses. You ain't just going from the north 5,000 miles up to Canada without stopping in between. So there are also safe houses in between. It is very important. Actually, even the pathways themselves are very important and have detailed records in order for this to be successful over at this point at least 50 years and multiple conductors and thousands of slaves. So um, things like where a safe house is and if a safe house has become unsafe, um, things like that. All this is detailed. Who the conductors are is very important. And all these things are very detailed. And Harriet Tubman is written even in the conductors and abolitionist notes um, records in relation directly to the Underground Railroad that mention Harriet Tubman, and even some of them, such as I believe John Brown, had actual back and forth conversations with her or Meta Ross.
We're going to purple.
Hi.
Which one of these books have the military experience in it? Fusion.
I have
Like I
no idea.
said, I looked up
No, I'm
the
asking because
military
that's what I
records.
responded to. On my turn, I said in 1922 they wrote the book that had the military experience that you're quoting, literally. But I want to know which one of these books are the books that have that experience in it.
Okay, well,
I don't
we're
know if
gonna
y'all
go to
can
Can't
hear.
see
purple and
those
then we'll
books, and I
have
don't know that it
well,
is one of those books.
Go ahead, y'all.
right. Yeah, we're gonna go to purple. Go ahead, purple.
So I just want to make this comment because it's kind of been rubbing me the wrong way. Trolla, you are a very smart and well-read man, but so is everybody else on this panel. Well-read people. And you keep making blanket statements like we don't know who the Republican Party used to be and who we don't know who Robert or Ely is. And you even made a statement about, you don't want to destroy our heroes. And, we don't know about SNCC and we don't know about the other people involved in the Underground Railroad. Um, and I'm not trying to be offensive when I say this, but you're not the smartest person in the room. None of us are the smartest person in the room. And I just feel like, it would be appreciated if you didn't assume we were all 10-year-olds. Give these brilliant brains, yours included, a little bit of credit. Nobody on here has ever said, well, in this forum, that not only did we not know who Robert E. Lee was, but he's one of our heroes. None of us said we didn't know the origins of the Republican and Democrat Party. Nobody said they didn't know who SNCC was. I mean, you're just casting all these assumptions upon us. Just give us a little bit of credit, the benefit of the doubt. Um, I have been silent
Not
mostly, so I'm
responsible
not
for
going
your feelings.
to. I have been quiet, so I'll exclude myself out of this. But you
I
know,
thought you were talking
it's
directly to me. But
Issa and Fusion and Balboa previously, um, Rep, Asaru, they've all had very brilliant points. whether they agree with each other or disagree with each other. Just give people a little bit of credit. It's a bit much. Thank you.
So, in relation to the reference of the books that speak about, so this is kind of what I mean. So the books you pulled up, which I don't know which books those were because I can't see that small, but there
Oh
are
my God.
books that have her military excursion. The example of it, if that's the only thing you're looking for, which there's way more to it than
Hey,
that. Like
Fusion,
everything
before
that gets
Fusion,
described.
before you go on about the book, right? I gotta say something to her. I'm not responsible for your feelings. If I say Robert E. Lee and then I give a background for those who don't know who Robert E. Lee is, and it makes you feel less than for any reason, that's on you. That's how I talk. I'm not gonna change because you're emotional. I do want you to know that I'm not that person. You know what I mean? I personally don't care about people's feelings about how I talk. Like I don't, love breaking me is not gonna work. And Izza will tell you that I don't change how I talk. If you don't like it, oh well. It is what it
Well,
is with me. I'm not trying to be your
I'm
favorite
not.
person on here. And it's not a
I'm not.
competition for me either. I'm just having a conversation with this brother. You say you didn't talk over me, please don't. On top of that, I'm just telling you, I'm not responsible for your emotions. So you getting emotional about me saying, hey, Robert E. Lee, for those who don't know who Robert E. Lee is, for those who don't know what SNCC is, and there's probably a few people on this panel that didn't know who SNCC was. I don't know. It could be people in the comments who don't know who SNCC is. I mean, what SNCC is. And if they don't, then I should be if I'm speaking on it, I should elaborate on what it is. It's not to demean anybody or nothing. If you felt demeaned by that, it was your own personal feelings. That was something that you got to deal with, not me. The way that I said it appropriately, and I'm gonna still talk like that because that's how I talk. So the next time I talk, I'm gonna say, hey, in case you don't know who this person is, or for those who don't know who Robert E. Lee is, and if you take it personal, just know that it's you that's deciding to take it personal, and I don't give a fuck. I'm just being
Well,
honest. Go
I'm
ahead,
not all in.
Fusion. My bad. I didn't mean
Okay,
to cut you off.
we don't
I'm
even need all
I'm
of it.
I'm not all in
I
my
said what I
feelings.
said. It's over with.
I'm not. No, no. You don't get to determine what I can talk about. I'm not all in my feelings. I didn't raise my voice. I wasn't
Felt like you should
rude.
have not said it that way.
But, no, I don't have a problem with you saying, for those of you who don't know who Robert E. Lee is, that's fine.
That's what I
But
said, though,
to,
man. So
but
I mean, I
but
don't
but you
understand the
also
speech that you
said,
just gave. Just
I
because
don't
you
want to
see
just I don't
everybody
want to
going back and forth with me, don't mean I'm the common
okay, are you
enemy.
gonna let me
Hold
I'm
talk?
on,
not
hold
trying to do it
on,
that
Are you
way.
hold
It
gonna let
don't
me
work.
on,
talk?
hold
I love being the
on,
bad guy.
Are you gonna let me
hold
talk?
on. Let her finish.
But to end that with, I don't want to destroy you guys' little hero. That's what you said.
Yeah, that,
Nobody said
so
that. No, nobody said that. You know, and it's not that I'm all in my feelings. I haven't raised my voice once. It was an observation that I feel like you aren't respecting the intelligence, and I took myself out of that because I haven't been contributing. I feel like you don't respect the intelligence of the other people on this panel. You are not the smartest person in this room.
well, I think all of y'all slow as hell. Next,
Okay, well,
Him per point.
okay,
Yeah,
there you
that
go.
edify
There
per
you go.
point.
everybody in this room dumb. Dumbass nigga.
So, and what also would further edify the point is
Let's see
um,
fingertips.
that is one of those books that you were talking about was one of those books that you pulled up by um, I keep forgetting that Sarah Bradford.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It says Sarah on the front of it. Like I said,
Okay,
I don't have
so
that
then
book. I don't know nothing about that
your
military
answer to
history
your
she told me.
question on which one of these books um, talks about her military service. If one of those books was by Sarah Bradford and it was called The Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman, that's one of those books. That book.
Yeah, is it blue? I said I don't have the book. Just listen to what I'm saying,
Well,
right? Because I think
it's got a bunch of
you guys
different
want to
colors.
fight. You're looking for a fight. I'm saying I don't
No, I'm
have
giving
that
you the
book that
reference.
have
No,
that
no, this isn't
military
a fight. We
experience.
we
I was
don't
asking
disagree on
which one of
actually a
those
lot
books
of
have
stuff.
it.
Yes, no, we agree on we disagree on very specific things. We may agree on we may half and half agree actually, but I'm speaking on this specific thing that you asked in relation to her military service. Even though there's all the stuff before her military service is the last, let's say the last great contribution that people talk about or whatever. But that's after 1860s. That book was written in
Yeah.
1869 right after a couple years after the Civil War. So that's a book written by a woman, um, actually with accounts from Harriet Tubman because Harriet Tubman was still alive at that time, and this is right not many years after, as far as her life was concerned, not many years after the Civil War, similar around the same time as Dred Scott case. So Dred
Yeah.
Scott and Harriet Tubman were alive at the same time. But even before that,
That's a
that's
fact.
1861 that the Union Army was even formed. So before anything with the Union Army, even if you confirm that account, which in that particular book by Sarah Bradford, you can confirm the military accounts. But and there's
Yeah.
also other books that confirm that military account. Um, but there's also everything in her life before the military account even started. There's the Promised Land, the Kate Kate Clifford, um, which that's like from the 2000s or something. So that would be in. It talks about the military excursions, but yes, that would be in more recent books that you may be talking about are written after her life, and that's way after her life. The one you mentioned before, The Road to Freedom.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
book that I'm looking at is well after her life. The one that you said by Sarah something, I can't see the date on that. But all three of those books that I showed you, I don't have near three of those books, but I do have a book on her. So I was saying, which of these books get detailed about the slave experience? Because I'll buy the book, read it, and I mean, not slave experience, but the military experience.
that
Because
would
I'll
be
buy the book, read it,
Scenes
and
in
try
the
to
Life
see,
of
you
Harriet
know.
Tubman. Yeah, that would be the
Gotcha.
Sarah. Yeah, that would be that one. But you're right. The even though the Road to Freedom almost seems like it's if you don't know the date, because I'm sure it's 2000 something. I think the Road to Freedom, or it's like way after, like closer to our life than it when it was written. So even if you don't know the date of it, it seems like it was actually written a while ago, but when it was written more recently. But there are books that were written closer to that time. And um, there's poems and other things that mention Harriet Tubman and Phyllis Wheatley and different people throughout the time. Sojourner Truth writes about things. Elizabeth Catlett has an entire is an artist who has an entire collection of abolitionists and things like that through Speaks of Harriet Tubman. And you have B. Richards' poem called um, Ain't I a Woman, which is also referencing her. So there's many accounts, not just by white people, actually mostly by black folks, because those are the eyewitness and anecdotal accounts and everything. Um, but the Harriet Tubman existed. Harriet Tubman involved um, in the raid that freed over 700 slaves, and Harriet Tubman before that freed at least 70 slaves. Prior to that, is we have much historical evidence to back that up. But that book would be a good place to start. Yes.
Yeah, for those are all them slow people in this room that don't fucking read, because I think that's like the majority of y'all. Well, I agree with almost everything you said, Fusion, except for the military shit. I ain't never read that or nothing about it, so that's why I said if I can get a book of reference, I'm definitely gonna check it out. But as far as that goes, the Alex Haley book of Malcolm X, and I'm just giving an example. For those who didn't know, Alex Haley wrote a book about Malcolm X, the guy who, for those who don't know who Alex Haley is, he's the guy who wrote Roots. For those who don't know what Roots is the movie with Kunta Kinte. For those who don't know who Kunta Kinte is, he's Toby. Now, with that being said, though, that guy Alex Haley did a lot of bullshit and put a lot of bullshit in the game. So There's another book by Malcolm about Malcolm called Malcolm Speak. It's one of the best books about Malcolm X I've ever read. And I always like there's people once we get into a conversation about Malcolm X, which we're not, I always push that book. But the reason why a lot of this stuff happens, the reason why I was bringing this stuff up about the books is because it does matter who wrote the book. It does matter for those who get those books. You do realize like you'll get one book and it'll have one history, and then you'll read another book about the same person, and the history will be completely different because of who wrote it. And then you can go look into the author's life and start seeing that some authors are not credible in some of their stories, and it takes a lot of the credible shit away from them. But that book, Malcolm Speaks, if you want to, for those who know who Malcolm X is, and those who don't know who Malcolm X is, he was part of the Nation of Islam. For those who don't know who the Nation of Islam is, he was Elijah Muhammad's version of Islam.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't
Oh,
realize that I would need to like time how long we stayed on each topic because I did want to reach other topics, right? I'm definitely going to do 50 Shades of Pseudo Part 2 because I want everybody to be able to bring whatever quote unquote pseudo topic they want to talk about or just which turned into like a embellishment of history. If you have a couple of things you want to say about different embellishments of history, we could talk about that as well. Like I'm down with all of these type of conversations. But I do kind of want to get into the conversation about melanin versus carbon versus uromelanin, faux melanin, neuromelanin, all of that stuff. Because I think that and this is not to go against like the spirituality that has been created around it. Keep that, right? But when we start talking about who are using this to talk about who's human and who's not human, and I think that's when we kind of cross into a different type of conversation. With that being said, I'm gonna start it off with Fusion, and for everybody else, we can just start raising our hands, and y'all could put your little 2 cents in. Fusion.
all right. So, you know what? You're right, because I had something else on that other thing. But yeah, we'll go right into basically the difference between melanin and carbon. So let's we'll start out with melanin. Basically, you have eumelanin, pheomelanin, but you also have neuromelanin, which are three different structural compounds that are all roughly carbon based, but carbon isn't the only base in melanin. Carbon isn't the only element in melanin. You have carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, and oxygen, actually, I believe, in melanin. So these are elements. And there's a difference between an element and a molecule. So to say that carbon and melanin are the same thing would be inaccurate, um, because carbon is a carbon atom. Carbon has 6 neutrons, 6 protons, electrons. That's an atom makeup, and then that atom makes multiple different things in the world. And carbon wise, it's very consistent across you know the Earth and the universe, and this isn't the only place that it is. Same with hydrogen. Same with nitrogen. So I'll go into melanin. Let's see. All right, I'll read a quick blurb. So, um, melanin produced in two types: eumelanin, which provides mostly black and brown pigment, pheomelanin, which gives more yellow and red pigment. And the production of these pigments begin with the conversion of the amino acid tyrosine into melanin through in, um, a series of reactions catalyzed by tyrosine, key enzyme in melanogenesis. Melanogenesis being the creation of melanin through melanocytes. So because we've been going for a minute, so I'll try to skip through a lot of this. Um, the entire process is tightly regulated by signaling pathways, particularly the cyclic um, pathway, which is activated by the MC1R receptor, and it's stimulated by hormones. Um, and is stimulated by hormones. Once synthesized, um, this is transferred from melanocytes to neighboring molecules where it forms a protective layer over the nuclei of these cells to shield the DNA from UV damage. This transfer distribution is of melanin are crucial to the overall pigment of the skin. So in UV rays, when you take a map, did a video on this, or watched a video on this also, or someone brought this up in a video. If you look at the map of the UV rays across the Earth, and you look at the map of melanin across the Earth, that's why those maps basically match up. Where you see more UV rays, you see more melanated people. When you see less, where you see less UV rays across the Earth, you see less melanated people. So, melanin, by the way, currently right now is $8.99.59 per gram. Synthetic melanin currently is $5.03 per gram. So, we'll go with tyrosine, just for a quick. So tyrosine and phenylalanine. Basically, we're going to go into these just real quick because melanin doesn't just pop up even from carbon. Before it even gets to carbon, there's a process between carbon and melanin, even though carbon is roughly the skeleton of a melanin molecule. But your skeleton is not you. So even though it holds you up. So tyrosine has to be made first. So you need tyrosine to make melanin. And tyrosine, I won't go through all this, but tyrosine, the amino acid made through a biochemical process from other amino acids. And the process occurs in the body via enzymes and known as phenylalanine. Phenylalanine.
Phenylalanine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, so tyrosine you have as a naturally occurring thing that is a biological thing, but then once you
Cheese.
get to phenylalanine, then now you're talking about something that doesn't naturally occur in the body. So let's go down to phenylalanine quick. So phenylalanine basically occurs in things in your diet, things that you eat. So to even produce melanin, you have to eat certain things in order to get this particular enzyme into your body in order to even catalyze the tyrosine in order to make the melanin. So you don't just jump from melanin to carbon, even in the process. Even if you take melanin backwards, you're not going to hit carbon. You're going to go back and you'll hit tyrosine, and then you'll hit phenylalanine. Phenylalanine. It's NINE at the end. So you will hit all those, and then you'll hit other amino acids and things before you actually hit carbon, which is why melanin and carbon shouldn't be necessarily used synonymously as if they're the same thing. So I'll stop right there if you need. But I do have more before I go into the differences between the two, physically and structurally.
Can I go in a little bit what you said? Yes.
Absolutely.
Saying the comparison of carbon to melanin would be like a tire to the car that the tire's on. I think the most simplest form of melanin has 18 carbon atoms. Was it DHI? I think it's called DHI. You can fact check me, please do. but it's DHI, which is the simple chemical. And if the more complex that the melanin gets, it's like a lattice. And I wanted to double back on what you said because it was a connection there. It's like the same molecule lined up over and over again. And the different lengths of that chain is the different types of melanin. Some have some carbon compounds on it, all of the different ones that you name. But the reason why the melanin that we're using that is so dark, if you check the molecular structure in its matrices, the actual length, height, and width of that molecular structure is the perfect size to absorb UVB. So you spoke about the sunlight and UVA, UVB, UVC, how it penetrates the atmosphere of the earth, and the places where it's more prevalent is where you find that black melanin. So yeah, I love where this is going. Yeah, I just wanted to just give a little bit on that. I know you get ready to go in there.
Just to piggyback off of what you were saying, and just for everybody who needs the DHI information in layman's terms, it's intermediate in the biosynthesis of melanin. It it says it's formed during the enzymatic oxidation of the L-DOPA, a precursor to the dopamine, and is involved in the production of eumelanin, the dark pigment found in hair, skin, and eyes. It's significant in studies related to pigmentation disorders, hair color, and conditions such as albinism. So just for everybody who didn't really catch the DHI reference, just to clear some of that up. Does any, I think we're going right back to fusion.
Okay, so I don't know if it's screen share wise. I don't know if I can really screen share. Um, can you screen share right now?
Yeah, you should have permission. Let me make sure the permission is on. Yeah, everything should be good. You should be able to screen share. Mhm.
All right, let me so is that sharing? Can you see that?
Yeah, we see you.
Okay, so this is the structure, the chemicals, the actual structure of eumelanin and pheomelanin, basically. So even when we're talking, not only are eumelanin and pheomelanin, not only are carbon and melanin very different, but eumelanin and pheomelanin are also different in structure. So not only would it be incorrect to say that melanin is carbon, it would be incorrect to say eumelanin and is pheomelanin or pheomelanin is eumelanin because they have two different structures. As you can see, like the car analogy, one is a Nissan Sentra and one is a Suburban or whatever the case is, even though they're both cars. But if you've ever driven both of those cars, you know they are different. So let's go into, one second.
I'm gonna pull up a melanin molecule of just melanin, and that's from ResearchGate. Also for the reference, I'm gonna have to do this manually, but so in its simpler forms, you have the melanin molecule that has the structure of carbon, but also, as you can see, has nitrogen and hydrogen and oxygen. So that will be the structure of the melanin molecule before we even get into the function. So the structure is very different from carbon. And if we look at a carbon atom, this is the structure of a carbon atom, roughly. An atom is um, much more difficult to conceptualize the structure of. So this is a diagram, but six protons, 6 electrons, and neutrons. So this is a carbon atom. So clearly, a carbon atom is not the same as a melanin molecule. So hold on one second. That's melanin and carbon, and the difference between melanin molecule and a failed melanin, eumelanin molecule, a melanin molecule, and a failed melanin molecule, and a carbon atom. So there's also a difference between an atom and a molecule itself, and then you also have neuromelanin. So neuromelanin is a little bit different. So I'll bring up neuromelanin for functional purposes because it's easier to do. Um, Neuromelanin, which you can find mostly in the basal ganglia of the brain and the locus coeruleus, basically, not necessarily so much in the pineal gland. This is another reason we're distinguishing melatonin from melanin. So melatonin would not be the same as melanin, and you can look at it through function. So functionally, the pineal gland um, neurologically helps you go to sleep or get sleepy. That's why it's called the third eye, because it has tracks that go from your eyes to the pie, so it can tell when it's getting dark. That is when it begins to secrete melatonin, not melanin. And the substantia nigra and locus coeruleus use melanin. And you know that these two things are different because the substantia nigra is a part of the basal ganglia in the brain. And that's the part of it's a system that regulates your movement and everything. And people with Parkinson's disease have, that's the part of the brain that's dysfunctioning, is the basal ganglia in general, but at a deeper level, it's the substantia nigra, which literally means black substance, where the most of the melanin in the brain generally is between that and the locus coeruleus, which is more in cognitive function. But in movement,
Greetings,
reason a
Bryce.
person can't
This is Optimus
hold a
Prime,
glass steady in
leader of the
Parkinson's
Autobots,
disease is
speaking to
because
you on this very
the
species.
melanin, the neuromelanin in the substantia nigra of the basal ganglia creates and produces dopamine, basically. That's why people who have Parkinson's disease, they give them dopamine pills, which sounds like they should probably be given them melanin pills. But the regulation and the neurotransmitters that regulate the basal ganglia are basically a balance between dopamine and acetylcholine. So without dopamine going to that system is not working properly, and now that person is having trouble with their motor functions. So the way that you know that melatonin and melanin and neuromelanin are two very different things are not only by chemical structure, because we can look at that as well. Then you'll see the chemical structure of melatonin and the price of melatonin versus the price of melanin on the market. All these things are different, and the function is different because if you flip the two around, basically. If you take the melanin from the substantia nigra and put it and make the pineal gland secrete actual melanin, now you have problems sleeping. And if you take the melatonin from the pineal gland and put it in the substantia nigra of the basal ganglia, now you have Parkinson's disease. So these are clearly not the same thing either because they have different chemical structures and different functions.
So
But
with
now
that
before I go
being
to the
said,
next.
really quickly, because with that being said, it was uh there was one thing that I did want to debunk when it comes to like the neuromelanin and melanin, because as humans, we're not the only ones who have it. Like it's not exclusive to us. And and even when it comes to just neuromelanin, like yes, humans have it, but so does certain primate species, certain rodents have it, dogs and cats, certain birds, like all of them have neuromelanin inside of them. That is produced. And then also when it comes to melanin itself, like birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, invertebrates, like melanin is very old. It's not exclusive to Black people or just humans in general. So I just wanted to throw that out there really quickly. And y'all could, whoever wants to speak, go right ahead.
Yes, real quick to that. So just to the pseudo aspects of that come out also of saying stating that only black folks have neuromelanin, or even that only black folks have neuromelanin and eumelanin, and white folks have pheomelanin. When we all have all of it, neuromelanin, pheomelanin, and eumelanin, because eumelanin is specific to certain pigments, like your darkest parts. Um, so your darkest parts are your pheomelanin, or are your eumelanin. But even a black person has pheomelanin, especially inside the mouth, everywhere where it's pink on the body, including the part of the woman that we love the most. That's pheomelanin. That pink there that's inside the vagina, that's pheomelanin. Okay. And the areolas are generally pheomelanin depending on how it's um, how it's sequenced or whatever. But eumelanin is in the skin and hair and eyes and things like that. So we all have both. And we all have neuromelanin. And it's definitely proven that we all have neuromelanin because the reason that um, Parkinson's disease even exists is due to a lack of neuromelanin. So just adding that.
Isn't it, now this is me speculating, but I like to think it's awesome how the parts of the brain there, I can't remember the name of it, but the NM, I can't remember right now, but it's meningeal, colomeningeal, NM. These are acetylcholine is in the neurotransmitting department, and it's funny how these melanin cells are actively in the process of using acetylcholine, and if you don't have that process popping like you explained, you get Parkinson's disease. You wind up like what's his name, Michael J. Fox, and others that we've seen. And I know one thing: you can get your body to produce acetylcholine, which helps with your memory. It actually helps with the electrical transmissions in your brain. It's the same thing that eels use. And these chemicals in conjunction with melanin, it serves that melanin has some type of pathological function, some deep pathological function, even down to its spatial dimension. So I think this is a beautiful subject. And yeah, carbon, there's no versus. Carbon's just one of the building blocks of melanin. The reason why carbon is so important because it's so abundant and amongst all of the other elements or atoms that we know of, it's one of the most stable. Even in its own matrices, a diamond is its tensile strength is impeccable. You know, it's very hard. It's one of the hardest substances. And, you know, these elements in conjunction with each other have these functions that are like small little robots. They're small little polarized molecules that serve more than one function in the body. And I think expressing how diverse the melanin spectrum is and all of the different types of melanin we have in our bodies. These are like all of the different little nanobots that we have in our bodies that literally are activated epigenetically. They are performing the function by the monitoring, the self monitoring of genetic expression. So, you know, melanin plays a part in turning shit on and off. How many times do you went to the beach? You came back 5 shades darker. So there's something very active about it. And it seems, and I'm being illustrative. It seems to be alive to me, and it's so integral to life. But I am digressing.
Agreed. We can definitely agree. So that's the thing about the once you actually don't have to go into the um subjective aspects of these things. The real life aspects of these things are just as awesome and just as exciting, or more so
Yeah,
than even the most pseudo philosophy on it. Once you really still start going into it, it's something that's
yeah,
actually very interesting and very even entertaining to a degree.
yeah. So
Like
you
even the
say,
fact that you
I
can
have,
even do that. Okay.
Let me just cut in real quick because Cool and Haitian just got to the panel, and I know this
Yeah,
conversation probably
I
sounds
wasn't
a
here
little
for a
all
while.
over the place.
Hello, guys.
Yeah.
I was here for a while, but I was leaving the office, so I just kind of said, okay, let me jump up and just see what's up. But I think Butcher just told me about the amino acid. I know nothing about that type of stuff. I don't know something. I just be quiet. But
I think
I'm
you're
listening
breaking
though.
up. I don't
But I
know if
do have
that's
a
just me.
question though.
You're breaking up,
I,
hon.
oh, breaking up. I do
yeah,
have
your
one
mic
question.
volume is okay. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Can y'all hear me now? Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was saying I was coming from your office, so I didn't really get a chance to really hear. Because when I was here, y'all was discussing Harriet Tubman. I don't know if there was a debate, and then we were talking about melanin. So Butcher told me it's about amino acid. I have no idea what that means. He said, "Don't reference me." Okay, right. Okay, cool. Well, anyways, Butcher in the comments mentioned it's about amino acid. Like I said before, I have no idea what that means. But my question is, I've heard melanin and carbon. Now, just for me to get an understanding, are we saying that all human beings have melanin, or are we saying that only black people have melanin? Because I hear this a lot on this app, which I think is complete nonsense. But what are we saying?
Right.
Just so I can.
No, we're saying that not
Right. So
only
you
all
got the
human
gist
beings.
of it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sorry, go ahead, Fusion. That because that's
No.
the
Yeah.
gist of the conversation. That's why we kind of jump from Harriet Tubman to melanin, because
Oh,
the panel is based on just pseudo conversation talking points, and we're just sitting here debunking them. So
okay. So you guys
we're
believe that all
on
human
that
beings have melanin,
aspect.
right? You guys believe all human beings have melanin, not just black people?
Well,
In
not
general,
not
human beings
all
have
human
melanin.
beings.
Yeah. It's like
Some
saying all
human
human beings
beings,
have arms.
right?
Say
But
what?
there's some human beings that don't have melanin, or they have
Who
little
who
to
doesn't have
none.
melanin? Because
Um,
Well, if
I
you
done
don't, it's
research
albinos,
on
considered a
that stuff.
dysfunction,
albinos,
like albino.
albinos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why I mean it's like saying all humans have arms. Technically, humans come with arms in general,
Right.
but there are some
Okay.
cases where a human doesn't have arms. You know what I'm saying? But
Ah,
Not
in general,
technically,
humans
humans
have
come with
arms.
arms in
okay.
general.
So I got a question. So albinos, we know it's a genetic defect, right? I mean, I'm not know the proper. I'm not, guys. I'm not really too much science. I'm into more history and stuff, politics, right? Um, but I just want to verify this because I don't believe that white people don't have melanin. When I did my little research on that part, I did my little research on, and all human beings technically have melanin. Otherwise, they won't survive unless they have a defect like an albino, like you're saying. Is that what we're talking about here?
Correct. Yes,
So
and that is correct.
yeah,
If you have zero melanin, it's rough out here. Especially, we could definitely say that it would be not impossible, but it would be very difficult for an entire species to not have melanin at all.
What's
Like
up, farming? Yeah.
albinos here and there, yeah. But melanin is very both, and all three melanins, both not just eumelanin and um eumelanin and pheomelanin, the pigments
Hmm.
and things like that. There's also neuromelanin.
Okay.
So even if you can get away with not having much eumelanin or pheomelanin, you definitely ain't
Hmm.
getting away with not having a significant amount of
Okay.
neuromelanin.
Can I ask you guys another question? Going back to the first when I first was in the comments listening while I was driving. Um, do you? Oh no, just park right here, bro. Just put everything in the back. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Are we saying that Harry Tubman did not exist? I heard another name.
uh,
Something Ross.
Well, they were saying Harriet Tubman
Aramita.
started off. They said she started off stealing slaves, tell them that she gonna free them just to put them
Stealing
in.
slaves.
Yeah, she was going around telling the slave, they gonna go get free, and when they go with them, she bring them to another plantation.
That's not true at
right. That
all.
would be pseudo
We
historical
weren't talking about
or
that
pseudo
in
historical,
particular.
but that's not what we're talking about. But yes,
Well,
you're saying that would be pseudo history.
you saying she don't exist.
But,
I mean,
No, we're not
shoot.
saying she don't
You
exist. We're
you the
saying
one
the
Who
saying
you
she
history.
don't
talking to?
exist. You the one saying
Who
she
made
don't
that
exist.
claim?
So who
Who
would be
made
a
Wait,
that
bigger
hold
claim?
idiot?
on, hold
Who
Who
would
you
be
on,
a
talking
hold
bigger
to?
on.
idiot?
oh
Who
man,
would
Hold
be?
what
on,
Ain't
we're
no
y'all.
hold
saying.
The
on.
energy
You
is
should have
about
been
to
said
go.
hold
Oh,
on.
wow. Okay. Hold
Wow.
on.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not having a discussion with that dude. That dude's
Thank you.
mental.
yeah, thank
I
you.
just got
Damn,
home from
somebody beat me to it.
12 hours of work,
Oh,
dog. I'm just not trying to deal with that. You know what I mean? But what I'm saying is, man, Harriet Tubman did not. I mean, these are historical. We got to be careful about destroying our quote unquote heroes because every culture has heroes. What is wrong with people destroying their own heroes? Um, of course, Harriet Tubman freed slaves. Harriet Tubman was, in my opinion, one of the greatest military strategists you had in this country because of the simple fact that you had to have logistics and strategy to plan that when you're going against a whole system designed against you for hundreds of years. So, how is she not? I mean, okay, like I said, I came in late in the conversation. I was hearing certain things, but I just heard another name as if she didn't exist. So I'm trying to figure out who doesn't believe that Harriet Tubman existed, and
okay.
you know,
So yeah, you heard Mita Ross, which was been her original name before changing her last name to Tubman from like her husband from being married and changing her first name to Harriet after her mother. So Mita Ross will be her technical name. But yes, everything you're talking about, as far as Harriet Tubman, we have that's one we've already debunked, basically.
Yeah, it was
debunk saying
debunked
what? Like she
and it
doesn't
was
exist? Hold
grounded.
on, hold on. Debunk. My bad. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out. Are you
You
saying that
know,
she?
debunk
Are
that
you?
she hadn't existed. Yes, we've already given much evidence that she has, much records and books and
Okay.
writings from people that she existed, and her accounts through the Underground Railroad by abolitionists and
Okay.
other
Okay.
conductors, along with information and letters from Frederick Douglass, and a couple of books were even referenced that were written during the time she was alive. So yes,
Okay.
whoever, if
So,
you've been
so,
hearing that,
so
it has
can
been
I ask
thoroughly.
a
Okay.
sidebar, an immediate sidebar? Is there more empirical evidence for Harriet Tubman slash Aramita than there is Jesus?
Yep, significantly more. Actually,
Then
mainly
who?
due, not actually due
Then
to the
who?
people, but more so due to the timeline. Actually, so I'm not going to even chop that discrepancy up. I'm going to more so account that to the timeline more so than the actual existence of either one.
Then, but who's the other person? I'm
People
sorry.
could write that. No,
No.
this
Oh, sorry.
this
You said then
was
who?
no,
You
this
said Harry
was
Tubman.
yeah. I was using the maiden name, and basically, to me is you said something too. Your
Hey,
heroes.
Candy.
You said heroes. Some people view people as heroes. And the thing is, you create your own heroes from the qualities that you like, not the qualities that are presented. Because if I control your hero, if I want to kill you, I just kill your hero and kill your movement. And a lot of people aren't motivated enough. That's why they need a hero, because that's where their motivation stops. And when you kill the hero, they don't have enough motivation to even martyr their heroes. So they just become dead heroes, and the people that those heroes represent become defeated people over and over again. This is why all of the leaders get assassinated. They have to get assassinated. The only ones that are important now are celebrities, and that's why you see them voting and shit and carrying on and twerking and dancing and shit, because it's all about your energy. And that was another aspect of the conversation that we were having, or I brought up, was that it's all about your mental energy. What part of you can I control? And there was a divide between uh, fusion, or what appeared to be a divide between fusion and Troller, with Troller is refuting the information and the evidence, and rightfully so, because we really don't fucking know, and correlating um, evidences is not necessarily 100% absolute. However, we can say that some of it is factual. So now it's based on the interpretation and your mental, and how you feel about the narratives, the many narratives that involve pride and hope and deliverance and freedom, and also conspiracies, lies, Machiavellian usage of mental constraints on people, and they're dead. So there's an ultimate message to it all. So I mean, I take Harriet Tubman for what I've been told and what I've researched and what I've studied. However, do I know these things? No. So what else can I apply to this whole fucking situation? I apologize for cussing. What is it that I can do? What is it that I can extract from this, discern from this narration, that I can use to my benefit and my children's benefit, even if it comes from the enemy? Are we not observant enough to think objectively when it comes to heroes? Often we watch movies where people we thought were the heroes were the villains, and the people we thought were the villains were the heroes. So it depends on the person telling the story and how close or far that is from fact and truth, and the person reading the story and how far from the truth or close to it, and it's just a bunch of things that it's like reading a story. How do you apply that? I can get the Hogwarts and get a magic wand, the Harry Potter wand, but does it work? Or am I just chanting and hoping, you know? Where's the application?
Hey,
You can be
Box Five,
black
can you
as
mute
Right.
yourself?
all
So
the
that's the
same
kind of the
formula
point
for me.
in the objective thinking of it. So
But can I?
um,
Okay, I
that's
raised
kind
my
of the
hand. I'll wait.
point. Is so that you okay? Yeah, just real quick. So the objective thinking in it is where the value in it. And you're right, regardless of if the story, just even when you mentioned Jesus, there's things that are in the story that you can learn from, and any mythology actually. Hell, Lord of the Rings or fucking Avengers or whatever it is. There's parables, there's metaphor, there's messages, all kind of things that can be of value. But the thing is that once you
Box
start to look
five, I
at
need you to mute because you have feedback coming, and it's messing up our recording.
Just
I'm
mute
gonna
him,
just
please.
mute
Just mute
you.
him,
Yeah, I'm
please.
gonna mute you.
Can I say something real quick? Look, we know Harriet Tubman existed. There's accounts from not just her, other slaves, other people at that time period, just as historical documents. I mean, once we start questioning things that we know existed, just for the sake of being objective, I get it, but and I get your point of what value you take from it. That's a legitimate point. But I mean, I'm very dumbfounded by people who question. Once again, I'm gonna say they're heroes because a hero is someone that does something that people should follow, people admire. It's a bunch of attributes and objectives for that. But you know, I mean, it's just questioning Harriet Tubman and her existence and what she did. It's like I don't know, man. It just
well, the
I don't want to use
It's
the
questioning
word
of it
nothing
retarded.
wrong.
is
It's,
historically
it's
it's some of it, and the way that it goes in history is um, certain things are testable only to a degree. So when Asar was talking about, and we kind of touched on this earlier, and even in science, it's not 100% necessarily, but you don't need 100% to get to what he's talking about, which is functionality and usage and activity in relation to that thing. So just like the theory of relativity is not
but
100%
that's a but that, hold
theoretical.
on, but that's a different thing though. A theory versus a living flesh and blood human being. There's no theory about that. I mean, we could question certain intentions or people because what tends to happen is just you have to take a look at who is causing the chaos and the confusion amongst people that are trying to find essentially liberation and freedom and understanding and preserve their history. There's a particular enemy that goes around the world doing this that causes chaos and confusion. Like it is
Right.
not
Some of
that
that
hard
chaos
to
and
understand that
confusion
these
is in
people.
the pseudo-scientific and pseudo-historical, pseudo-archaeological
The word
spaces.
pseudo, but the minute you put pseudo in front of something, it kind of like discredits it. So if it's pseudo science or pseudo
Exactly.
history, that means it doesn't exist. It's bullshit.
Well, if it's pseudoscience, so this is we also went over this. So this is what I mean by something being, say, pseudo-historical. Like saying that Harriet Tubman never existed would go against all evidence that we have that says that she
Well,
existed.
exactly. So
However
it would be
embellished the
bullshit.
story is. Right, making it pseudo, not genuine,
Right.
and not gone through. Especially
Right.
if it's pseudoscientific, that means you're saying something is the case scientifically that hasn't gone through any of the methods of science, basically. But it's being stated as if it's a scientific fact, or something's being
AKA
stated as a
Terrence Howard.
historical fact.
Right. AKA
We
Terrence
could go
Terrence
there
Howard nonsense.
But but
Is that
to a
one
but
plus
degree.
one equals three?
Not
cool.
all
Hey,
nonsense,
cool.
but some nonsense. It doesn't have to be all nonsense
I,
to be pseudo.
right.
You
I'm
know.
thinking of it like this: if it's pseudo or not. It literally is left up to your discernment, that application. How can you use it? What good is it? Because she's dead.
But I think that no,
You
no,
know
no,
what I'm
but sorry,
saying?
that's two different things. That's two different things. I get what you're saying. How you use it in terms of like the movement and what it means to you and significance of her actions. That's one thing. But we cannot dispute the person just because they died. My grandmother died doesn't mean she didn't exist and she didn't create a legacy. So I'm
That's
not
not
gonna
my
sit
point.
there and allow. No, I get it. I'm just not to your point, but I just think it's dangerous, right? Where we are
Okay, so
like,
real
It's
quick to
will
nothing
both of
we
y'all
wrong
ever,
points,
with
you
really,
know,
basically. So
ethnocentricity.
something
I got you.
right, but there's something that's pseudo that, or when it comes to the functionality, historically, it's a little bit different than sign like functionality with a tire. I can put it on the car and
right?
say whether it rolls or not. Functionality historically
Hmm.
also becomes important to distinguish whether something is what evidence we have to point to get to a high probability of yes, because the way you functionally use history is to teach future generations also and to teach the current
Exactly.
generations. So functionally, it's good to have that thing not be historically, like teaching children in school that Harriet Tubman never existed and was
Yeah, that's crazy.
actually taking slaves. When Harriet Tubman went to a plantation, she took slaves off that plantation to another worse plantation or to work for the Union Army when the Union Army didn't even exist at the time. Would be pseudo
Okay.
historical and functionally damaging to the education that you're trying to provide.
Exactly. And can I just say
For the
one thing real
sake
quick?
of
I'll go back on
argument,
mute. Oh, sorry, I'll go back on mute because I gotta do something. I'll be on mute, but I'm just gonna give an example. You got people that are claiming a land. Just quickly understand what I'm saying. That are claiming a land from quote unquote 3,000 years ago with no real evidence. And then you got people that are still struggling in America with physical evidence, with a young woman, I'm gonna say, well, woman that existed with physical evidence that actually did their work with physical evidence. And we're questioning that versus them who's making nothing but blockbuster movies, lobbying in Congress, destroying other people based on bullshit. So how is it possible that they are able to use the function of a myth, but then we're having a problem discussing actualities? I mean, I just think it's incredibly dangerous because if we're gonna say that Harriet Tubman didn't exist, when she was taking people to slavery in the Union, and like really, yeah, y'all don't think that's weird?
No, we do think it's weird. Just to reset the room, yeah, that's how this conversation got started. It got started
Oh, okay.
when I had actually mentioned her, and then Trolla brought up Dan Calloway. Actually, he brought up Dan Calloway, and
And
I
Callaway's a
had indicated that
nutcase.
that's yeah, I had indicated that's when I had kind of fell out of listening to any of the things he was espousing because of the notion that she never even existed. Um, I'm actually
Well,
glad that I didn't bring up my next thing, which would have been the Willie Lynch letter, because that might have led into another 3 hour conversation. But we'll proceed from there. Because I know some of the people on the panel wanted to get to some more of the scientific refutable pseudo constructs that were emoted throughout this Beagle land that we dwell. But I'll land there.
Well,
that was a
well,
nice
before we,
refresh.
yeah, that was a nice refresh. It's actually, we've been at this for about 4 hours so far. So I know the recording is going to be terrible when we're trying to upload it. So I'm gonna close this out for right now. We can continue the conversation, of course. But just for recording purposes, I had to close this out. And also, I'm also going to invite everybody out for 50 Shades of Pseudo Part 2. It's a whole lot of stuff that we really didn't even get to today. Like, we literally only hit two topics in 4 hours. So I will be timing the topics next time. So we don't get, and I'm timing everybody with how long that we talk. Not that I don't love hearing the things that y'all have to say, but um we just gotta get to more topics than just the two. With that being said, I want to thank all of y'all for coming out, listening to us, having this great conversation. It was amazing. Just a reminder, tomorrow we have the Kamala Trump debate going on right here on this panel at 2 p.m. Please be there. It's going to be Team Purple in Box 3 versus Team OG Moses. It's going to be a good night. We also have Exploring Islam Part 2. It was asked for. We are delivering. It's going to be on Wednesday, the 23rd at 8 p.m. With that being said, I am closing out. Thank everybody for coming out, and I appreciate y'all.
Peace
All right,
to the
y'all.
God.
Now for
Appreciate you so
that
much.
was that. Thank you, thank you.